My name is Ashley, and I live a peaceful, happy life with my husband, John. However, there's one problem, my sister-in-law, Rachel. My brother and Rachel have a daughter named Aita. Aita is 3 years old, and John and I love her. She's an adorable niece we enjoy spending time with. We don't mind watching her sometimes, but Rachel brings Aita over almost every week. Ashley, can you watch Aita again this week, please? She asks. Okay, I reply, and Aita happily runs from the doorway into our living room, where John is relaxing. I assume he'll keep an eye on her, but I decide to talk to Rachel about it. John and I really love Aita, but watching her every week is a bit overwhelming. Even though we work from home as freelancers, I'm an illustrator, and John is a programmer. It's hard to balance childcare and work when we're busy. As freelancers, we set our own schedules, but we still have deadlines, and watching Aita can be a big distraction. We can't let anything happen to her while she's with us, so I end up working on my tablet and keeping an eye on her at the same time. I felt bad bringing it up because I didn't want to cause issues between Rachel and my brother, but I couldn't take it anymore. I'm really sorry, Rachel, but could today be the last day we watch Aita? Rachel's face turned angry as I asked her, even though I tried to be polite. By the time I realized I'd made a mistake, it was too late. Rachel raised her eyebrows and snapped at me. You wouldn't understand, Ashley, since you don't have children. Raising kids is hard. You have no idea how difficult it's been to raise Aita so far. Stop complaining when you don't even have a child. Her words felt like knives to my heart. She didn't know that John and I had been trying to have children, but I have a condition that makes it extremely difficult for me to get pregnant. We went to a doctor and started fertility treatments, which are exhausting and expensive. Every month, we hope for good news, and every month we feel the stress and disappointment. Being blamed for not understanding because I don't have kids hit me deeply, especially given everything we're going through. But Rachel didn't stop there. Unlike you two, who just stay at home all the time, I'm a sociable person. I have friends who rely on me, and today I'm going to London to see one of them. I left Aita with you because I know you're home. You should appreciate the fact that I'm doing something for you too. With that, Rachel, dressed up and smelling of perfume, turned and left. I walked back into the living room, where John, who had overheard everything, was unusually angry. I didn't want to make a scene in front of Aita, so I stayed quiet, but that was harsh, he said. It's been about a month now since Rachel started bringing Aita over every week. I decided it was time to discuss things with my brother, Chris, so I gave him a call. Hello, Chris. Oh, hey, Ashley, it's been a while, how are you? I was already feeling annoyed from my recent argument with Rachel, so I replied a bit sharply. Hey, Chris, Aita is a sweetheart, but it's hard on us if she's here every week. John and I have deadlines to meet as freelancers, and a little consideration would help. He sounded confused. Aita? She's sleeping at home right now. What? That didn't make sense. He even sent me a picture of her sleeping, and it was clearly Aita, but younger than the child Rachel had been leaving with us. I sent him a photo of the girl who was with us now, playing with John, and Chris replied, Who's that? The last time I'd seen Aita with Chris, she was a baby who couldn't even walk. Suddenly, it hit me, this child Rachel brought over every week might not be Aita, but then why was Rachel bringing her? Chris and I were both confused. John, who'd been listening to the call, spoke up hesitantly. Chris, I'm sorry if this sounds rude, but, has Rachel been acting strange lately? John and I had talked about this before. After Rachel's parents passed away, she seemed different, and we stopped seeing her at family gatherings. The Rachel I remembered was modest in her style, but lately, she'd been dressing in bright colors and wearing flashy accessories. Chris seemed to have noticed this change, too, and responded with a dejected, Yeah. I guess. He sighed and then said, I might have an idea about what's going on. I'll call you back later. Then he hung up. John and I felt sorry for Chris, but couldn't help wondering if Rachel might be cheating on him. We didn't know for sure, though, and decided to leave that part to Chris. But what we could do was try to find out more about this little girl who'd been staying with us. Turning to her, I asked gently, Aita, you're 3, right? Can you tell us your full name? We'd assumed she was Aita and had never thought to ask. If she wasn't really Aita, we needed to know. With a cheerful smile, the girl replied, I'm Aita Johnson, I'm 3 years old. John and I exchanged glances, trying to hide our shock. We smiled and praised her, saying, You said that so well, all while feeling increasingly uneasy. I'd never heard of the last name Johnson in our family, So I realized we didn't know who this child really was or where she came from. Of course, it wasn't her fault, but something strange was definitely going on. Hoping to help my brother, I messaged him on WhatsApp to let him know that the girl staying with us called herself Ida Johnson. He replied briefly, "Got it, thanks." That afternoon, my brother showed up at our home with another person and asked, "Sorry to bother you, but I need to discuss something with Rachel when she comes to pick up Ida. Can we wait here?" I agreed, feeling a bit relieved. After everything Rachel had done, I didn't feel like forgiving her. Later, as evening turned into night, Rachel finally arrived, stumbling in, clearly drunk. "I'm here, Peter. I came to pick you up," she slurred. Not knowing what was about to unfold, I greeted Rachel with a forced smile. "Welcome home, Rachel. You seem really drunk. How about a glass of water?" Rachel smirked. "That'd be nice. Is this your way of apologizing for what you said this morning?" She walked into the living room, where Ida was happily sitting on the lap of a woman who was looking at Rachel sternly. Rachel looked at the woman with confusion and asked, "Who's that? Did you hire a babysitter?" The woman introduced herself. "Nice to meet you. I'm Katie Johnson, Ida's mother." Rachel was so shocked that she couldn't even take the glass of water. I'd never heard of anyone named Johnson in our family, so we had no idea where this little girl actually came from or who she was. Still, it was obvious that none of this was her fault. Hoping it might help, I messaged my brother to let him know the girl with us called herself Ida Johnson. He just replied, "Got it, thanks." That afternoon, my brother arrived at our house with someone else. He asked, "Sorry to bother you, but could we stay here until Rachel comes to pick up Ida? There's something I need to discuss with her." I was happy to help, especially since I felt betrayed by Rachel and wasn't in the mood to forgive her. As the evening turned into night, Rachel finally showed up, staggering into the house, clearly drunk. "I'm home," she slurred. "Peter, I came to pick you up." Unaware of what was about to happen, I put on a fake smile and greeted her. "Welcome, Rachel. You look pretty drunk. How about a glass of water?" She smirked and replied, "That would be nice. Is this your way of apologizing for the nonsense you said this morning?" When the cheerful Rachel entered the living room, she found Ida happily playing on the lap of a woman sitting there. Rachel stared at the woman, who was looking back at her sternly. "Who's that? Did you hire a babysitter?" Rachel asked, confused. The woman introduced herself calmly. "Nice to meet you. I'm Katie Johnson, Ida's mother." Rachel was so shocked she couldn't even take the glass of water. As I offered Rachel a hand, she stumbled backward, bumped into a corner, and fell over. I didn't move to help her up, watching as she lay sprawled on the floor. Then I heard my brother's voice from the doorway. "I brought him," Chris said, entering the house with a man who had bright, dyed hair. Rachel, still on the floor, looked shocked to see both Chris and this man. She turned pale, and the man went pale when he saw Katie, the real mother of the child we thought was Ida. Chris told Rachel and the man to sit down, and they nervously complied, sitting stiffly but looking around with anxious eyes. To keep the tension away from the child, John took the little girl, Ida, to another room. Once everyone was settled, Chris took charge, looking down at Rachel and the man with a serious expression. "I never imagined my own friend would cheat on me with my wife. Isn't that right, Noah?" Noah, who had been friends with Chris since high school, looked terrified. Chris, who had a rough reputation back in the day, was clearly angry. "Rachel. Noah. I can't believe it. And then you left your own child with my sister and her husband as if nothing was wrong. What's that about?" Noah, panicked, stammered in defense. "Rachel came to my salon. She started it. She told me she liked me and wanted to be with me." "Oh, so it's all my fault now?" Rachel snapped. "You were totally into it too." Chris had heard enough. "It doesn't matter who started it. The two of you should start by apologizing." They both tried to apologize, but Noah quickly shifted the blame. He pointed at Katie, who was now crying and visibly furious. "This is Katie's fault. She ignored me. I was lonely, so I cheated. Blame her, not me." Katie, who had been quiet and calm until now, exploded. "Don't you dare blame me. Do you have no self-control? I never imagined you'd leave Ida with strangers while I was at work. I'm so sorry for what you went through," she added, turning to me and John. Katie's anger seemed to unnerve both Noah and Rachel. Rachel tried to justify her actions, saying, "Well, Ashley and John don't have kids. They work from home and have plenty of time, so it was convenient for them." I couldn't hold back anymore. Just because we don't have children doesn't mean we're here to take care of yours. And how dare you bring a stranger's child into our home under false pretenses? Rachel, trying to brush it off, said, "What's the big deal? I just thought I'd show you what having kids is like. You don't have any of your own anyway." Her words hit hard. "Rachel, you know we've been struggling to have children. You knew about our infertility treatments. It's infuriating that you'd say something like that and take advantage of us." I took a deep breath and continued, "You've been incredibly rude, bringing a stranger's child into our home, acting like we're just free babysitters. And let's be honest, you show up in ridiculous makeup, smelling of heavy perfume, and dressed like you're going to a party." Rachel and Noah sat in silence, finally realizing the hurt and chaos they'd caused. When I finally said everything I had been holding back, Rachel's face turned bright red. She knew she couldn't argue anymore, so she bit her lip and stayed silent. After that, Chris and Katie thoroughly scolded Rachel and Noah. Both couples ended up divorcing, and Rachel and Noah were required to pay hefty educational costs for their children. Chris also shared the story of Rachel and Noah's affair with friends back in Nebraska, and soon the rumor spread to Noah's local hair salon. Noah became the talk of the town, and as a result, he was fired from his job. Rachel, who had always been a housewife with no work experience, struggled to find a job. Since she'd been a stay-at-home wife since college, her job search was difficult. After her parents found out about her cheating, they disowned her, leaving her to scrape by doing odd jobs. In the end, both Rachel and Noah lost their jobs and families due to their affair and were left in a sad and lonely state. As for me, I received an incredible surprise. Our fertility treatments worked. I'm now pregnant, and we're expecting twins. John and I were overjoyed, shedding happy tears as we look forward to our baby's arrival. We still keep in touch with Katie and little Ida, and a special bond has grown between us. Ida and our niece love playing together, and they even touch my belly and say to the babies, "Let's play together once you're born." It's incredibly sweet. Though Chris and Katie were hurt by their partner's betrayal, they've committed to raising their children as single parents. John and I promise to support them however we can. Together, the four of us, John, Chris, Katie, and me, have become close, united in raising Ida, our niece, and the twins we're expecting. Through everything, we've formed a strong, supportive family bond.
Has the move been completed yet? The movers will arrive in 3 hours. It's Scott's lover, who is trying to kick Nicole and me out of the house. Mandy stole Scott from me. I used to run a salon from home, and losing this house means I also lose my workplace. She intended to take over my salon. However, things didn't go smoothly, and ultimately she will face hardships. I never thought such misfortune would befall me, but at the same time, it's the first time I've been supported by so many people. I feel the importance of having good connections with people more than ever. My name is Kelly Johnson, 45 years old. With my husband Scott Johnson, who is 5 years older, and our middle school daughter, Nicole, makes us a family of 3. We have been married for 15 years. Scott and I met at work, and I quit my job when we got married, but Scott continued working. He has now been promoted to the point where he attends board meetings as an executive director. The reason I quit was not to become a housewife, but to start my own business. I once shared my dream of running a salon with Scott when we started dating. That's a wonderful dream. I want to support you with all my heart. Really? I'm so happy. You're the first to say you'll support me, Scott. I had always been told by family and friends that I shouldn't become an entrepreneur, so his support truly meant a lot to me. Scott actually encouraged me to quit my job and go back to school when we got married. It's a chance to study seriously. Really? Tell the truth, I've wanted to go to school for a long time. I wanted to open a massage salon that supports dieting. This required a substantial knowledge of the body. I discovered I was pregnant right after we got married and attended school while pregnant. On days when I felt unwell, I got to take classes online. With Scott's support, I attended school for 2 years, gave birth to Nicole during this period, and successfully opened the salon at home. Those busy 2 years are vivid in my memory, as if it were yesterday. For Nicole's sake, I worked hard to make the salon successful. This effort paid off, and 3 years later, my schedule was filled with repeat customers. A system where regulars who received maintenance would refer new customers had formed. By the 10th year, the salon had become so popular that it was hard to get a reservation. When the 10th anniversary came, customers and friends celebrated with me. That day, I received a bouquet of flowers from Scott and Nicole and felt truly happy. "You've really done well. Thank you. I made it this far because of your support." I appreciated his help and expressed my gratitude to Scott for his support. "I have something to tell you." "What is it?" "I've been promoted, and I will become an executive director. I'll be attending board meetings from now on, and it might get busier." "That's wonderful." "Congratulations." "Thank you." At that time, I was confident that our life together would continue to be happy even after Nicole had grown up and left home. However, a few years later, I would discover Scott's betrayal. One day, Mandy Simpson appeared at the salon without notice. She is the daughter of the president of Scott's company. "Are you Mrs. Johnson?" "Yes, that's me." "Do you have a reservation?" "No. I heard about this place from Scotty." "Scotty, I am Mandy Simpson." Simpson as in. Mandy looked at me with a smile. No doubt, she was the young lady of the Simpson group. When Scott and I worked at the same company, the president used to bring his elementary school daughter to the office. After graduating from university, Mandy joined the secretarial department through her parents' connections. "You're the president's daughter, and..." "Yes, I came here today to enjoy some beauty treatments." "Really?" "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked today, and the next availability is in 3 months. I'm really sorry." Upon hearing this, Mandy's expression suddenly darkened. I had a bad feeling, and my heart started pounding. "You're turning away a customer who made the effort to come here." "I'm sorry. I'm managing this salon alone, so I can only handle one customer at a time." "Then you should cancel the current reservation and let me in." "That's difficult. It would be rude to the customers who have made reservations." Mandy refused to leave. The next customer was due to arrive soon. I didn't want such a scene to be witnessed at the entrance. "I'm sorry you came all the way over, but could you first make a reservation?" "I also take cancellations if you can't make it by chance." Then Mandy glared at me angrily and said, "I won't make a reservation. Who do you think would come to such a dirty salon and left, catching a taxi?" I was simply shocked and could only stand there stunned. Compared to a salon that a lady would visit, it might indeed look inferior. But I didn't deserve to be spoken to like that, and felt a bit down. However, the events of that day were not over yet. That night, Scott came home with a furious expression. "Hey, I heard you turned away the president's daughter today." "What?" "The news has reached you already. I'm the one who referred her, so of course it would. But you should have made it clear that reservations are mandatory." "She's the president's daughter, you know." "So what?" "Being the president's daughter doesn't entitle her to special treatment." I couldn't understand why Scott was so angry. Maybe he was concerned about his career. Mandy isn't involved with the company, and the president doesn't seem that strict. Why are you so upset? And something else I'm curious about. Why does she call you by your nickname? That fact bugged me, so I asked. Scott then showed a clear sign of being disturbed. "She was at the president's golf tournament. The president calls me by my nickname, so she probably does too. The fact that the president calls Scott by his nickname seemed strange to me, but I still didn't understand why he was angry. Is your promotion that important? Don't you support me? I always supported you. Having the young lady as a client could have boosted your reputation. This salon prioritizes reservations. New customers are important, but regulars are even more so. Hanf. As if a customer who comes once a month would spend much money. At these words, I was at a loss for words. I didn't have the energy to argue further, and I asked Scott to consult me in advance if he intended to make any referrals. I won't make any referrals anymore. Scott was angry, and we didn't speak to each other at home for a while. I couldn't understand why the matter with the president's daughter had to cause so much trouble. We only started talking again when Scott forgot something. A USB was left plugged into the home computer. When I called, he asked me to bring it to the office. I had several appointments that afternoon, so I hurried to the office. My bad. Scott said that, took the USB, and quickly left. I might have hoped for a lunch together, but nothing of the sort happened, and we parted ways quickly. Is that you, Mrs. Johnson? The person who greeted me was a junior colleague who had joined the company when I was still working there. She had become a respectable career woman, which surprised me. Ms. Adams? It's been a while. You seem well settled. Well, I'm a senior now. Time really flies, I thought. I wanted to chat more, but with customers waiting, I said, how about we grab a meal sometime? Here's my contact, and handed her my business card. Thank you. There's something I'd like to discuss, actually. Something you'd like to discuss. Yes, it's a bit difficult to talk about here. She then whispered in my ear. It's about Director Johnson. What? I was concerned about my husband, but we agreed to get in touch later. I felt uneasy. What on earth could it be about? However, a few days later, I witnessed an unbelievable scene. That day, I had gone on a business trip a bit further away. I was visiting a factory to see a prototype of a new lotion for the salon. When I arrived at the station, I saw a familiar car parked. Watching it, I noticed Mandy sitting in the passenger seat. I discreetly observed from a distance. No one was in the driver's seat at first, but soon a man came out of a store and took the seat. It was undoubtedly Scott. He was supposed to be on a one-night golf trip today. I thought maybe it was a competition Mandy was participating in, but something felt off. It was a woman's intuition. Then, in the next moment, Mandy wrapped her arms around Scott's neck and kissed him on the cheek. Scott happily returned the kiss on her lips. They laughed shyly and drove away from the station. I was so shocked that I just collapsed right there. The next day, late at night, Scott came home. Oh, you're still up. You could have gone to bed. We need to talk. About what? Who did you go on a trip with last night? It wasn't golf, was it? Scott seemed a bit taken aback by the sudden question. Yesterday, I saw you at the station. You were kissing Mandy in the car. Hearing this, Scott sighed heavily. Yes, I went on a trip with Mandy. Surprisingly, Scott calmly admitted to the affair, and even more astonishing, said, now that it's out, it's easier to talk. I actually plan to wait until next year, but I'm not interested in you at all anymore. I want to marry Mandy soon. Even my mother agrees. I never expected that my mother-in-law had been consulted in advance. For the first time, I realized she was on her son's side. Are you considering a divorce? Yes. I'd be happier coming home to a young wife rather than an older woman like you. Seeing the kiss was shocking enough, but I never expected such a statement. Let's discuss this with Mandy as well. I managed to say this while desperately trying to maintain my composure. Over the weekend, we invited Mandy over and had a talk. We haven't told Nicole about the situation yet. She might notice that something is off, but being a middle school student, she seems to be considerate and hasn't said anything. We asked Nicole to go out, and the three of us gathered. Scott and Mandy, sitting in front of me, were holding hands. There was no sign of remorse from them. To them, I was just an obstacle now. When did this relationship start? About a year ago, I guess. That long. I hadn't noticed anything over this past year. I remember that Scott got promoted a year ago. When I realized that the late returns home and the weekend outings were all to meet Mandy, anger welled up inside me. After the divorce, I will be taking over the house and the salon. Wait a minute. Even if I leave the house, why should you take the salon too? Well, the salon is attached to the house, isn't it? Are you planning to continue coming here? That's right, but I hadn't thought about not being able to provide services to the local clients anymore. If I leave this house, I have to give up the salon as well. I was so shocked by Scott's affair that I completely forgot about the salon. Even if I have no other choice but to leave, it will be impossible for you to run the salon. I will shut it down. Don't worry, my father will provide financial support, and I will hire staff. I never imagined losing not only Scott but the salon as well. That hurt even more. I want you to sign the divorce papers quickly and leave. I can't wait to live here with Scotty. Yes, I see, but it won't be that simple. Is it a matter of money? I will pay proper compensation. I have the money. That's your parents' money, isn't it? And do you really think your father approves of this? My dad supports everything I do. And with Scotty by my side, there's no problem. Even his mother supports us. I no longer had the energy to delay the divorce. If Scott's decision is this firm, there's no point in clinging to anything. Since I would receive compensation, I decided to proceed with the divorce proceedings quickly and settle everything. However, I was worried about Nicole. Just then, the door burst open, and Nicole entered the room. Mom, let's leave these people and get out of here. I support you. Oh, Nicole, not staying with your wonderful father? That's fortunate. I didn't want you to be in my way anyways. Nicole stared intently at Mandy. What do you like about this old man, old lady? Old lady? Ma am? I'm only 23 years old. Oh, is that so? I thought you were older because of the heavy makeup. Mandy trembled with anger. What kind of upbringing is this? I'm sorry. My daughter is just very honest. Mandy left the room trembling with anger, and Scott hurriedly followed her. I apologized to Nicole. Nicole, I'm really sorry. It's not your fault, Mom, and you can open a salon anywhere because of your skills. Encouraged by Nicole's words, I resolved to try hard in a new place. I might not have been able to make such a quick decision if it weren't for Nicole. I didn't want her to have anything to do with that woman. The procedures were carried out swiftly. All matters regarding compensation and child support were arranged through a lawyer. I honestly told my salon clients that I was divorcing and leaving the salon. There were words of encouragement from them, as well as reactions of disappointment and anger. It felt like everything I had built was gradually crumbling. Then the moving day came, and Mandy showed up. Has the move been completed yet? The movers will arrive in 3 hours. That will take some time. There's no need for you to keep watch." While Nicole and I were packing, Mandy wandered around the salon and spent time intimately with Scott. I tried not to let it bother me. When the movers arrived, we successfully moved all our belongings. Well, this is goodbye from us. Bye-bye. Mandy, arm in arm with Scott, waved at us. I handed her a thick file containing legal documents for the salon. "This is important documentation for running the salon, so make sure to read it carefully." "I understand." Thus began a new life for Nicole and me alone. Using our savings, we bought a used house and set up part of it as a new salon. I was surprised at how many bookings we received after announcing the opening date. Despite the increased distance, many of my regular customers came to visit. Additionally, acquaintances living near the new store spread good word about the salon, and Nicole actively promoted it on social media. Tears spilled over as I realized how many people were supporting me. A month later, the salon was running smoothly. During that time, I received numerous frantic calls from my husband and his lover on my cell phone, which I continued to ignore. However, they even started calling the salon. Hearing Mandy's voice was exasperating. "Hey you've exposed us, haven't you? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. Scott and my father are in trouble right now." It seemed there was trouble at the company. I didn't need to know the details, but just to be sure, I contacted Ms. Adams. "I would like to discuss something important with you. Are you available tonight?" After work, I agreed to meet her. After your divorce, these photos were distributed among the people in the industry. The photos she presented showed Scott and Mandy having a secret meeting inside the company. What is this? Do you remember when I said I had something to discuss with you? This is it. Since it was right after your divorce, I thought it was no longer necessary. But hearing Mandy bragging about how she ousted you made me lose my patience. Scott and Mandy's affair was already widely known within the company. The president, indulgent towards his daughter, did nothing about her actions. So, I decided to leak this fact to the public. As a result, Ms. Adams and several other employees took photos of Scott and Mandy's secret meetings. Scott and Mandy were careless and were easily photographed. But why you? Because you helped me a lot when I was a new graduate. I felt like crying. Also, I was angry at Mandy, who did whatever she wanted after joining through connections, and at Mr. Johnson and the president for overlooking it. Currently, a corporate affair scandal could be a fatal blow. The public's view of infidelity is harsh, and clients tend to distance themselves quickly. But won't you and your colleagues be troubled if the company faces problems? Don't worry. Our company was set to be acquired by a foreign corporation several years ago, and it's possible to request a transfer to the parent company. It seems that the acquisition of the company had already been decided. This issue has devalued the company, and the sale at a very low price is underway. The president only now got furious about the affair. Scott was urged to take responsibility. However, expectations were low that Scott would take any meaningful action, and he eventually declared he would resign to take responsibility and left the company. Afterward, there was constant strife between the unemployed Scott and Mandy. Mandy tried to return to her parents' home, but her mother refused and actually opposed her marriage, saying, "Don't ever come back once you leave." With nowhere to go and her father busy with company issues, Mandy was largely ignored. Eventually, with no means to live on her own, Mandy became dependent on Scott. Then, another problem occurred. The salon was sued. This was because a customer developed skin problems due to the lotion used. Bad rumors spread quickly, and customers left in no time. Mandy, who was not involved in customer service, decided to blame the employees for the problems that occurred. Angry employees left as a result, and new problems arose. Mandy did not have a massage qualification, and the salon had been viable thanks to the employees. She had never looked through the important documents I handed over when I left the house. However, bookings from customers continued to come in. Unaware customers thought I was still running the salon and visited. As a result, many complaints were lodged with the Consumer Consultation Center, and eventually an audit was conducted on the salon. The salon, which had not followed any operational rules, was forced to close down, and it was unable to refund prepaid vouchers. Mandy's spending was terrible. Having nowhere to go, Mandy visited my salon. "Please help me. I have no one else to turn to." "Why are you asking me for help? Because there's no one else." At that moment, customers resting in the waiting room stood up and confronted Mandy. "You have the nerve to show your face here. Just go back where you came from." One by one, the women who were regulars at my salon and had come from far condemned Mandy. Unable to bear it, Mandy fled back home. The salon she managed soon went bankrupt. What remained were the refunds to customers and unpaid wages to employees. As a result, Mandy took out loans to settle these debts. Her parents refused to assist her, and she was forced to borrow from financial institutions. Meanwhile, Scott still had not found a job and, due to his pride as a former director, was picky about employment. "You should work, even if it's just at a store or something, to make some money." "What? There's no way I would do such work. You should work instead." Such arguments continued to be a regular occurrence. Eventually, unable to withstand the pressure of repayment, Mandy started working as a cashier in a supermarket, and Scott began working as a delivery person. But it was still difficult to repay the debts. Mandy eventually went to her parents' house to beg for help. She promised to repay and created a promissory note. A few days later, Nicole suddenly burst into the house as if fleeing. "What's wrong?" "He's chasing me." "Who?" At that moment, Scott appeared, wearing a delivery service uniform. "What are you doing?" Suddenly, he started apologizing at the entrance. I sent Nicole to her room and decided to talk with Scott alone. "Kelly, I was wrong. I want to start over with the three of us as a family. I'm serious. After you left me and Nicole for another woman, why do you think we can start over? I intend to divorce her." "What? It hasn't even been a year since you got married, right?" At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Nicole came downstairs to answer it. "You're here too." The person who boldly walked into the house was Mandy. "I knew you'd be here." "How did you know?" "The delivery service called me. They said they couldn't reach you. What are you doing, skipping work?" "I want to break up with you." "What are you saying?" Seeing the situation worsening, I urged them to leave the house. "I'm not considering remarrying you. We don't want to be involved with you anymore. So please, never come to this house again." "Wait. If either of you comes here again, I'll report you to the police for stalking. I will never come to this house again." Saying that, Mandy took Scott and left. In the end, Mandy was not considering divorcing Scott, and she did not let go of him. I wondered why Mandy so desperately wanted to stay with Scott. 5 years have passed. One day, when I was feeling unwell from a cold and went to the hospital, I saw a nurse pushing a patient in a wheelchair. The patient was a man in pajamas, unmistakably Scott. I was curious about what had happened but went home without doing anything that day. When I told Nicole about the incident, she said, "I'll look into it." Nicole still had friends nearby our old address who she could contact for information. From her investigation, it was revealed that Scott had a traffic accident while making deliveries and broke his leg. He had been hospitalized with injuries that would take 3 months to heal fully. Meanwhile, Mandy had left Scott during his hospitalization, leaving behind a divorce notice. She had only been holding on to Scott to ensure the repayment of their debts, and once she realized the medical expenses would be an additional burden, she abandoned him. Scott, now free, promptly signed the divorce papers left by Mandy. However, he was later fired from his part-time job, and his solitary hospitalization worsened his mental state, leading to a depression-like condition. Additionally, the reason Mandy abandoned Scott was that she had a new boyfriend. However, her new boyfriend was severely addicted to gambling and had been misusing Mandy's funds. As a result, Mandy was trying to escape from him. With nowhere else to go, Mandy reluctantly continued living with him. She was also mentally exhausted, and her situation was far from good. Neighbors noticed her severe weight loss and gossiped, "That wife has lost a lot of weight recently." Nicole was fed up with hearing about them and told me, "Don't worry about those people anymore." To Nicole, that man was just someone related by blood, not someone she could think of as her father. After graduating from high school, Nicole attended a beauty school for 2 years to become a nail technician, and after graduating, she has been helping at my salon. She has talked about wanting her own salon in the future, and I allowed her to set up a nail space in my shop, which she has made a reality. Though the divorce put many hardships on Nicole, seeing her work hard and stay positive motivates me to do better myself. Recently, Nicole said something that really touched me. "I want to become an independent adult like you." This was truly a joy to hear, the most valuable thing to me. I feel very happy now. Life cannot be measured by money alone. While there are many wealthy people, there are not as many who are rich in spirit. I want to be a person rich in spirit. That's why I cherish my relationships with those around me and live with a sense of gratitude. As Nicole grows, I too want to continue growing. From the windows of my new home, the night view of San Francisco glittered and sparkled. Located in the heart of Silicon Valley, this 4-bedroom house was an extravagant purchase for a 26-year-old woman to make on her own. Initially, the real estate agent looked at me with skeptical eyes. However, once my financial statements and proof of income were reviewed, his attitude completely changed. My name is Isabella Wang. I am a female software engineer working in Silicon Valley. 4 years ago, I earned a degree in computer science from a prestigious university and joined a major tech company as a new graduate. In an industry dominated by men, it was not easy to stand out as an Asian woman. Nevertheless, with my innate talent and hard work, I led project after project to success, and at the young age of 26, I had already achieved the position of a senior engineer. Since joining the company, I have lived a life of strict frugality. While my peers rented luxury apartments and drove the latest Teslas, I lived modestly in shared housing and saved most of my salary. This was not merely a hobby of thrift. It was driven by a clear goal: to own my own home. For me, it symbolizes financial independence and would be the culmination of my efforts. Finally, I achieved that goal. On the day I finished the house purchase process, I indulged in a small sense of accomplishment. It has a spacious living room, large windows reaching up to the ceiling, and a kitchen equipped with the latest facilities. Everything was exactly as I had envisioned. What I particularly loved was the master bedroom on the second floor. It featured an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet, and the balcony offered a panoramic view of the bay. Just as I was imagining my new life in this house, a phone call from my parents changed everything. "Isabella, we need to talk." My mother's voice lacked its usual authority. Instead, it was mixed with a frailty and urgency. Both of my parents had worked for many years as public school teachers in a regional city. My father was a math teacher, and my mother taught English. Despite having stable careers, their financial situation had deteriorated year by year. The cause was my father's reckless investment decisions. He had incurred massive losses in stock investments, and in attempts to recoup these losses, he only deepened them further. Eventually, they even took on high-interest debt. The school district is cutting budgets, and they've suggested we take early retirement. My mother continued, choosing her words carefully. "The retirement pay. It's almost entirely gone to pay off the debts." I could feel through the phone that my mother was holding back tears. "We can't even afford the rent anymore. We've been asked to vacate in 2 months." Silence followed. Though my mother didn't state it explicitly, her intention was clear. She was asking for help. A warning bell started ringing in my mind. I had known since childhood about my parents' lack of financial sense. The fact that I had won a scholarship and gone to university was because I knew I couldn't rely on them. Yet, why did I have to end up helping them? But blood is thicker than water. In the end, the words, "You can come live with me," came out of my mouth. Their move happened swiftly. Their belongings were fewer than expected. Most of their furniture had been sold to repay debts. What was left were worn clothes, photographs of memories, and just enough daily necessities for 2 people. When they moved in, I set clear rules. I would take care of the mortgage, utility bills, and other fixed costs. In return, they would handle the groceries. I also made them promise to respect my workspace and privacy. The first few weeks were seemingly peaceful on the surface. My parents showed gratitude and seemed to respect my work. My mother prepared meals daily, and my father started gardening. It appeared as though an ideal living arrangement had begun. However, the peaceful days did not last long. Gradually, my parents' true nature began to emerge. My mother monopolized the kitchen time and ignored my dietary preferences. My father turned up the TV volume during the day, disrupting my online meetings. These minor changes steadily began to disrupt the rhythm of my life. And then, an event that would ultimately trigger a breakdown occurred. The presence of my sister, Brittany, began to cast a shadow over my life once again. It was a Saturday morning. A dense fog typical of San Francisco enveloped the outside of the windows, casting dim shadows inside the house. I was deeply engrossed in debugging crucial code in my home office on the 2nd floor. Suddenly, I heard a knock. When my mother entered the room, I instinctively felt that something bad was about to happen. Her expression was mixed with complex emotions I had never seen before. Guilt, anxiety, and a strange kind of resolve. "Isabella, there's something we need to talk about," my mother said, her voice deliberately softened. It was the tone one might use when discussing something difficult with a young child. I took my eyes off my laptop screen and looked towards my mother. "It's about your sister, Brittany." The moment I heard that name, my body tensed. Brittany, my 23-year-old sister. She had ruined her own life while basking in our parents' perpetual favoritism. Since dropping out of college, she had been drifting through life without a steady job, dating dubious men, and breaking up repeatedly. Brittany's in trouble. She's having problems with her boyfriend Jonathan. Whenever Brittany was in trouble, it followed the same pattern. Reckless spending, debt accumulation, and eventually turning to our parents for a resolution. "She's looking for a place to live now." My mother's words trailed off. At that moment, I understood everything. "You're not planning to let her stay here, are you?" My mother's expression hardened. "We've allowed Brittany and Jonathan to stay here temporarily." A shock ran through me. They had made such a critical decision without my consent. You must be joking? I bought this house. I'm paying the mortgage and all the expenses. How could you make such an important decision without consulting me? It was an emergency. Brittany is family. Isn't it natural to help family members? That word, family. It was the magic word my parents always used. A convenient shield to justify their selfish actions. Family? I thought taking in our parents was fulfilling my duty as a family member, but now my sister too, and without even asking. You wouldn't understand. Brittany really is in trouble. She and Jonathan are. Who's Jonathan? Brittany's new boyfriend? Do you even know anything about him? My mother averted her eyes. Well, Brittany seems to trust him. My parents had always just accepted the men Brittany brought home without even verifying their backgrounds. That evening, Brittany and Jonathan arrived. My suspicions were confirmed. Brittany was dressed as flamboyantly as ever, her makeup far too heavy. And beside her was a man who could be immediately identified as a troublemaker. Jonathan looked to be in his mid-30s. He had an unkempt beard and sloppy attire, and there was a dangerous look in his eyes. When he entered the house, I instinctively tensed up. Their belongings were more than I expected. Large suitcases, boxes, and even a gaming console. Clearly they weren't here for a temporary stay. About the rent each month. As I began to broach the subject, Brittany quickly hid behind my mother. Mom promised it would be free. Her voice still carried the arrogance of the past. I looked at my mother. She hurried off into the kitchen. At that moment, I realized. This wasn't just a temporary stay. They intended to squat in my house. That night, I couldn't sleep. As I gazed out at the night view of San Francisco from my window, I pondered how to resolve this situation. But this was just the beginning. The worst was yet to come. Brittany and Jonathan gradually began to take over more space in the house. At first, it was minor things. Jonathan's gaming console appeared in the living room, and Brittany's makeup started to scatter across the kitchen counter. Noise deep into the night, unauthorized use of the refrigerator, and the common areas left in disarray. My parents acted as if there were no problems at all. In fact, they seemed pleased that Brittany had returned to the family circle. My protests were always dismissed with the same phrases. She's family. It's just temporary. Try to be more understanding. However, their true intentions would become clear all too soon. 2 weeks had passed since Brittany and Jonathan had moved in. My house was no longer just my house. It was a gradual but certain erosion. Jonathan's presence was particularly intolerable. Jonathan occupied the living room day and night, deeply engrossed in his video games at high volume. Even during my online meetings, his curses and rough laughter were incessantly audible. When cautioned, his retort was simply, "It's a shared space, isn't it?" Brittany was eroding my life in even more troublesome ways. She used my expensive cosmetics without permission, and the bathroom overflowed with her array of makeup products. Furthermore, she wore my designer brand clothes under the guise of borrowing them and returned them stained. My parents acted as if they were oblivious to these actions. Rather, every time I complained, they admonished me with a tone that suggested I should not blame Brittany over such trivial matters. However, a decisive event occurred one Wednesday afternoon. After finishing a video conference with an important client, I left my office and heard an unusual noise coming from the direction of my room. My heart started pounding faster. As I rushed up the stairs, an unbelievable scene unfolded before my eyes. My personal belongings, clothes, books, computer accessories, were all piled up in the hallway. My expensive monitor was carelessly placed on the floor, and designer clothes were thrown about. When I opened the door to the master bedroom, I found Brittany and Jonathan in the midst of clearing out my remaining belongings. Brittany was dragging clothes out of my walk-in closet, complete with hangers, while Jonathan was emptying my bookshelf. "What are you doing?" My voice trembled. I felt frozen all over with anger and shock. Brittany responded as if what she was doing was perfectly normal. "We're going to use this room." Who decided that? Mom said it was okay. "We as a couple need more space. You're single, right?" I immediately went in search of my mother. She was in the kitchen on the first floor, preparing dinner as if nothing was amiss. "What is the meaning of this?" My voice was as cold as ice. My mother set down her knife and slowly turned towards me. Her expression carried a sort of determination. "Isabella, I've thought about it. Brittany and Jonathan need more space. You're alone, and besides, you spend most of your time at the office, right? This house is mine. I bought it. I'm paying the mortgage and all the expenses. Yet you made a decision about my room without consulting me. We should share because we're family. You always think only of yourself. Have you ever considered Brittany's feelings?" At that moment, I understood. This wasn't just about a room. This was a calculated invasion. They had intended to drive me out from the start. My father was reading the newspaper on the living room sofa. Even when I sought an explanation, he just looked away in silence. As it had always been throughout my life, my father chose to remain a bystander. When I returned upstairs, Brittany and Jonathan had already started moving their belongings into my room. Jonathan's sloppy clothes were hanging in the closet, and Brittany's makeup had taken over my vanity. "Get out." I spoke in a low voice. "What did you say?" Brittany furrowed her brow. "Get out of this room, right now," Mom said. "It doesn't matter. This is my house, my room. Get out." Jonathan stepped towards me. He was larger than me, and his posture carried an obvious threat. "Calm down, you're being childish. We're family, right? Let's share." That word again. They continued to use it as a shield to justify their selfish actions. That night, I was forced to sleep in my office. Even taking a pillow and blanket became a major point of contention. Brittany insisted, "It's our room now," and my mother supported her. As I lay down, I stared at the ceiling. This was my house. The house I worked hard to buy. The house for which I paid all the expenses. Yet, I was being treated like an intruder, driven out of my own room. This situation had gone beyond all limits. The next morning, I made a decision. It was time to take legal action. Despite the physical pain from spending a night on the office chair, my mind was clearer than ever. I searched on my smartphone for "how to evict squatters" and "family eviction" throughout the night. At 8 a.m., I was on the phone with the most reputable real estate law firm in the region. The secretary said this type of case isn't uncommon, and she set up an appointment with a lawyer for the first afternoon. "I'm attorney Christina Johnson." The female attorney, in her mid-50s, listened intently to my story. Spread out on her desk were my house's deed, payment records, and detailed notes on recent events I had prepared. "This is a clear case of residential infringement. You are the owner and have made all the payments. Even if they are family, they have no right to occupy a room without your consent. But they are my parents. Family relationships are separate from legal rights. You have legitimate ownership. What's needed now is a firm stance." That afternoon, I explained the situation to my boss and took 2 days of emergency leave. My boss showed understanding for the family emergency. They could never imagine the true nature of that emergency. Following Attorney Johnson's advice, I first prepared a formal eviction notice. I set a 24-hour deadline for Brittany and Jonathan and a 30-day deadline for my parents. This was the minimum period legally required. Why 30 days for my parents? Legally, they are considered established residents. On the other hand, Brittany and Jonathan are recent intruders. A more swift action is possible for them. The moment I printed the notice, my hands trembled slightly. I was about to legally evict my own family, but there was no turning back. They had trampled over my kindness and cornered me. This was a necessary measure for self-defense. When I returned home, Brittany and Jonathan were lounging in the living room, as usual. My parents were preparing dinner at the dining table. It was as if this were their home. Without saying a word, I took out the 4 eviction notices. I placed Brittany and Jonathan's in front of them first, then laid my parents on the dining table. What is this? Brittany picked up the letter with an annoyed look. It's an eviction notice. Brittany and Jonathan, you have 24 hours. Mom and Dad, you have 30 days to leave. After a moment of silence, the room erupted into chaos. You're joking, right? We're family. Yes, we are. But family members should respect each other. You've trampled on my rights and tried to drive me out. It ends now. Jonathan stood up threateningly. You're going to kick us out. That's right. If you don't comply, I'll call the police. Attorney Johnson is also on standby. My mother broke down crying. How can you do this? Are you really my daughter? Those words stung, but I could no longer be swayed by emotions. If you don't leave by tomorrow morning, I'll call the police. I issued my final ultimatum. And I'm changing the locks. My father spoke for the first time. Isabella, can't you reconsider? I've had plenty of time to think. You had plenty of time to consider my feelings. But no one listened to me. That night, the house was enveloped in an unusual tension. Brittany and Jonathan began packing their belongings violently. My parents silently retreated to their room. I locked myself in the office. Just in case, I kept the emergency number for the police and Attorney Johnson's contact information close at hand. All night long, noises came from downstairs. The next morning, as promised, I had called a locksmith. Brittany and Jonathan had left during the night, and my parents said they would temporarily stay with relatives and left as well. As the sound of the new locks being installed echoed, I surveyed my now empty house. This wasn't the end. Perhaps the real battle was just beginning. But at least I had stood up for my rights. After the locksmith left, I returned to my room for the first time. My belongings were scattered, furniture mishandled. Yet all of this could be repaired. What mattered most was that I had reclaimed my life. My smartphone rang. It was from Attorney Johnson. Let's move on to the next steps. They may retaliate with legal measures. Let's prepare. Yes, I'm ready. A week after evicting my family, the situation took a new turn. One Monday morning while I was at the office, a colleague came to me in a fluster. Isabella, your family is in the lobby. They're shouting loudly. As I stepped out of the elevator, the scene unfolding before me was exactly as I had anticipated. Brittany and Jonathan, along with my parents, were causing a commotion at the reception desk. My mother tearfully proclaimed my heartlessness, while my father raised his voice demanding, "Let me see my daughter." Brittany, while recording everything on her phone, shouted, "She's the cold-hearted woman who kicked out her own family." Security was attempting to control them, but there was no sign of the situation calming down. I immediately contacted Attorney Johnson. Make sure to record this as evidence. This is clear harassment. Later that evening, another incident occurred. A flood of derogatory comments began appearing on my social media accounts. Brittany had spread my personal information online, crafting a narrative that labeled me as the cruel sister who left her own family homeless. Days later, the repercussions reached my workplace. Anonymous accusation emails were sent to the Human Resources Department, reporting my antisocial behavior. Fortunately, my boss understood the situation and supported taking legal action. "We will document everything," Attorney Johnson said with determination. "Their actions constitute clear defamation and harassment. Let's prepare for a countersuit." Following the lawyer's advice, we commenced a comprehensive legal response. Residential infringement, harassment, defamation, and business interference. All evidence was organized and submitted to the court. At the first hearing, the judge immediately acknowledged our claims. The defendants' actions are clearly illegal and malicious. The judgment stated, a restraining order was issued, and they were ordered to pay a substantial amount in damages. Brittany broke down crying in the courtroom. "But we are family." However, the judge responded calmly. "Family relations do not justify illegal actions." Following the verdict, the lives of my parents and Brittany quickly deteriorated. The damages payments depleted my parents' remaining savings, and even their pensions were seized. I heard rumors that my father had started working as a security guard in another town. The image of a former high school teacher working as a night security guard must have completely shattered his dignity. My mother began working part-time as a cashier at a local supermarket. I remembered how she once scorned such jobs as work for the uneducated. Now, she herself was in that position. Brittany's downfall was even more severe. As soon as the payment of the damages was settled, Jonathan disappeared. With accumulated debts, Brittany's credit cards were stopped, and she could no longer pay her rent. The last I heard, she was denied an application for public housing and was hopping from one friend's house to another. One day, I received an email from my mother. "Isabella, we are reflecting on our actions. Please, exempt us from the payments. We cannot sustain our lives going forward. You are still young and successful. Consider your aging parents a little. Please." From Mom. My reply was succinct. "No exemptions. You tried to take my home. You attempted to destroy my life. This is a legal matter. The time for emotional resolutions has long passed. Isabella." Attempts at reconciliation came several times through relatives afterward. But my resolve was firm. This was not merely a family dispute. They had systematically infringed on my rights and threatened my life. Months later, I saw Brittany at a supermarket in town. Her flashy attire was gone, and she looked exhausted as she scanned job advertisements. I heard my parents were considering applying for welfare. They who once declared, "People who rely on welfare are lazy," were now forced into that very situation. One might call it poetic justice. When I returned home, tranquility enveloped me. The chaos and noise of the past were gone, and peace had returned. The fact that this house was now entirely mine was fully realized. On my desk, there were still a few legal documents: court orders, records of damages payments, applications for the renewal of restraining orders. These documents also served as proof of my break with my family. A year had passed since the legal victory. This year brought significant changes to my life. I was promoted, and my salary increased further. My new position as team lead brought greater responsibilities and more fulfillment. Without familial interference, I could focus on my work, accelerating my career. There were also significant changes at home. The master bedroom was completely renovated and furnished anew. The negative memories left by my family were physically erased. I installed a state-of-the-art security system in the living room, enabling 24-hour surveillance with security cameras. My parents and Brittany had been captured several times lurking around the house. Brittany, who was clearly intoxicated, continuously rang the doorbell late at night. Her downfall was evident. I had grown accustomed to living alone at home. I could have quiet breakfasts, a work environment free from interruptions, and undisturbed nights. Above all, I felt reassured that my decisions were completely respected. This was indeed the life I had sought. The phone rang. It was from Attorney Johnson. "The wage garnishment process has been completed," she reported. "This fully protects your rights." Looking out the window, the sunset was beautifully sinking. I felt that a new chapter was truly beginning. My name is Cecile Miller. I am 32 years old and work as an analyst at an investment bank in New York. From the outside, my life probably seems perfect. I have a stable job, a comfortable apartment, and a loving husband. However, life always has its hidden sides. I have a younger sister. Her name is Melinda. She is 3 years younger than me and currently studies psychology at a local university. Melinda has always been the golden child in our family. Even as children, the difference in how we were treated was obvious. No matter how well I performed, it was simply as expected. If Melinda achieved average results, it was something to be celebrated. These small but constant differences etched themselves deeply into my heart. One memory stands out most vividly: the day of my high school graduation. I graduated at the top of my class and gave a speech on stage. My parents were present at the ceremony, but they left shortly after, saying they had to attend Melinda's theater performance. They didn't even stay for my graduation party. And yet, strangely, I could never bring myself to resent Melinda. She was a victim of our twisted family dynamic, just like me. Our parents' excessive expectations and favoritism must have been a burden for her as well. She always had to play the role of the perfect daughter, which forced her to hide her true self. When it was time to choose a college, I deliberately selected one far away. Studying economics at New York University opened a new world for me. There, no one saw me as Melinda's older sister. I was simply Cecile, free to carve out my own life. During my 4 years at the university, I studied hard. I covered my tuition through scholarships and income from part-time jobs while maintaining excellent grades. I kept financial support from my parents to a minimum. This was because I didn't want to feel indebted to them. After graduation, I landed a job at an investment bank on Wall Street. There I met Sam Davis, who would later become my husband. He was an experienced analyst who mentored me during the new hire training. Sam was the most understanding person I had ever met. When I opened up about my complicated family dynamics, he listened attentively. His words, "We can't choose our family, but we can choose how we face them," were a great comfort to me. After 2 years of dating, we got married. The wedding was small but warm and heartfelt. My parents and Melinda attended, but they seemed somewhat uneasy. My mother, in particular, had a look on her face throughout the ceremony as if she wanted to say something. After the wedding, our lives were stable, and our careers were going well. During this time, Melinda was admitted to a local university, and I decided to allocate part of my income to help pay for her tuition. It was a gesture driven purely by love for my sister. I wanted her to focus on her studies without struggling as I had. But life has a way of betraying our goodwill, and that betrayal often arrives in the most unexpected ways. That fateful evening began with an ordinary dinner invitation. My mother had called, saying that Melinda had an important announcement and wanted the family to have dinner together. I received the call while sitting at my desk at work. Immersed in the analysis of quarterly financial reports, I didn't immediately pick up on the unusual excitement in my mother's voice. "Melinda has some wonderful news," she said, sounding as if she had just won the lottery. "Let's celebrate together tonight." I silently sighed as I checked my calendar. I had an important conference call scheduled with a key client that night, but I decided to reschedule it for the next day. Declining a family gathering would only give my mother more ammunition for her passive-aggressive behavior that could last for months. "All right, what time should I be there?" 7 o'clock. "Your father will be home early too." Her voice was brimming with excitement. "Sam will come too, right?" "Yes, I'll let him know." I wrapped up work early, went home, took a shower, and changed into a moderately formal outfit. Sam was already ready and sitting in the living room, watching the news. "Are you ready?" He smiled warmly at me. "Yes," I replied while giving myself a final check in the mirror. "I bet we'll be hearing about another one of Melinda's accomplishments." Sam stood up and placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "It's okay. I'm here for you." Those words, as always, comforted me. Sam had been my emotional support during every one of these family gatherings. We arrived at my parents' house right at 7 p.m. As soon as I opened the door, I could hear the sounds of laughter and conversation from inside. My parents and Melinda were already gathered in the living room. Melinda greeted us with her usual captivating smile. She had grown into a beautiful woman. Her long black hair, perfectly sculpted features, and radiant presence naturally drew people in. It wasn't hard to imagine her being popular at the university. Cecile. Melinda sprang to her feet and hugged me tightly. The scent of expensive perfume lingered around her. "We've been waiting for you." My mother emerged from the kitchen, wearing a warm smile, although I couldn't tell whether that smile was meant for me or for Melinda. "Come on, everyone, have a seat." She gestured to the food laid out on the table. "Everything's ready." We followed her instructions and took our seats. My father, as usual, sat at the head of the table, barely acknowledging us with a small nod while keeping his eyes on the newspaper. Once the meal began, Melinda took a deep breath and made her announcement. "I'm pregnant." I froze, my fork suspended midair. Melinda was only in her second year of university. Sure, she was legally an adult, but wasn't she still too young? But my concerns didn't seem to matter, as my parents reacted with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for winning prestigious awards. "Congratulations," my mother exclaimed, almost shouting. "That's wonderful." Even my father, who rarely tore his eyes away from the newspaper, was now beaming with pride. A grandchild. What great news. I remained silent, observing the scene. There was a flicker of unease in Melinda's expression, but my parents were too caught up in their excitement to notice. "Who's the baby's father?" I asked quietly. Melinda blushed slightly and answered. We're still in the middle of discussing things. Something about her answer felt off to me. Dinner continued as my parents went on and on about Melinda's pregnancy. They discussed future plans, preparations, and most of all, how amazing a mother Melinda would be. It was as if I didn't exist in the room. After dinner, I excused myself to the restroom. On my way back, I heard my parents' voices coming from the kitchen. Normally, I would have walked past, but something about my mother's tone made me stop. "Never tell Cecile about Melinda's mistake." My heart seemed to stop at that moment. There was no warmth in her voice, only a tense seriousness. "Exactly," my father added. "We can't let Cecile find out." Standing in the shadows of the hallway, I listened as the truth unraveled. Melinda had been involved with my husband, Sam, and my parents knew about it but chose to keep me in the dark. My world shattered completely in that instant. My body went cold as ice, and breathing became difficult. The walls felt like they were closing in on me, and my heart ached with the pain of betrayal. I managed to regain control of my body and return to the living room, telling everyone that I wasn't feeling well and needed to go home. Sam looked concerned, but I couldn't meet his eyes. In the car ride home, I remained silent. Sam tried to speak to me several times, but I kept my gaze fixed on the window, offering only brief responses. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at Sam as he slept beside me, overwhelmed by the realization that everything I had built in my life was resting on a cruel lie. But by the time dawn broke, one thing had become clear in my mind. I had to uncover the full truth and confront this betrayal. The next morning, I woke up early. The clock showed 5 a.m. I quietly slipped out of bed and made my way to the living room. As the first light of day streamed in, I opened my laptop. I searched the keywords, top private investigation agencies in New York, and within moments, dozens of results appeared. I narrowed it down to 3 highly rated firms and sent inquiry emails to each. The first response arrived shortly after 9 a.m. It was from Wagner Investigations. The email was concise and professional, offering a free initial consultation. I immediately scheduled an appointment. That afternoon, I left work early under the pretense of a meeting with a client and headed to an office building in the heart of Manhattan. Taking the elevator to the 12th floor, I found a door with a discreet sign that read, Wagner Investigations. Brad Wagner was slightly different from what I had imagined. He didn't resemble the rugged detectives you see in TV dramas. Instead, he had the air of a university professor. A gentleman in his mid-50s. "Miss Cecile, could you explain the situation in detail?" He started with a polite tone. I explained everything, from the conversation I overheard last night to the sense of unease and the certainty that followed. As I spoke, Brad occasionally jotted down notes, listening with a serious expression. "So, your request can be broken down into two main objectives," he said, summarizing once I had finished. "1, collecting evidence of your husband's relationship with your sister, and 2, gathering proof of your parents' cover-up." "Yes, that's correct," I replied. "This is a delicate case," he continued, carefully choosing his words. "Considering the fact that it involves family, we'll need to be extremely cautious in how we collect the evidence. How much will it cost?" "The base fee is around $1,500. The total will depend on the number of investigation days. Additional charges may apply based on the situation." Hearing the amount, I hesitated for a moment. It wasn't a small expense, but I decided it was a necessary investment to uncover the truth. "Please proceed." After signing the contract, Brad explained the investigation plan in detail. He mentioned combining various methods, such as photo surveillance, monitoring electronic devices, and conducting interviews. From that day, my double life began. On the surface, I lived my life as a wife who knew nothing, while secretly awaiting updates from the detective. The first report arrived 5 days after the investigation began. Attached to the email were photos of Sam and Melinda meeting at a cafe near her university. Their expressions were intimate, making it obvious they were more than just in-laws. Evidence continued to pour in. Messages exchanged between the two, security footage showing them entering and leaving a hotel, and the most decisive piece, a testimony from Melinda's friend. Melinda talked to me several times about her relationship with Sam, her friend said in the recorded testimony. She seemed confused at first, but eventually she got deeply involved. But the most shocking discovery was the evidence of my parents' involvement. Messages exchanged between them and Melinda detailed plans to conceal the affair from me. And the motive behind it all became clear. My financial support for Melinda's university education had become a crucial source of financial relief for my parents. They feared that once the truth came out, I would cut off that support. To them, I was nothing more than a wallet. As the evidence continued to pile up, an unexpected opportunity presented itself. A party was planned to celebrate Melinda's pregnancy. When my mother told me over the phone, the plan had already begun forming in my mind. "We want it to be a lovely party," she said, her voice full of excitement. "Melinda's friends will be there too, and of course I have a few tasks I'd love your help with." "Of course," I replied calmly. "I'm happy to help in any way I can." There was no lie in my words. I truly intended to help, just not in the way my mother expected. Preparations for the party progressed smoothly. The venue was my parents' house, scheduled for Saturday at 2 p.m. Around 30 guests, including family, relatives, and Melinda's close friends, were invited. My mother had meticulously planned every detail. On the surface, I played the role of the devoted older sister, helping with the preparations. I assisted in choosing decorations, organizing the catering, and sending out invitations. I made sure to meet my mother's expectations at every turn. All the while, more evidence continued to arrive from the detective. The most intriguing were the text messages exchanged between Melinda and my parents. They had been coordinating their strategy regarding me. "We can't let Cecile find out." One of my mother's messages to Melinda read, "She's paying for your tuition. If she stops because of this, we'll be in big trouble." Reading that message erased any lingering doubt within me. This wasn't just betrayal. It was premeditated exploitation. On the day of the party, I arrived at my parents' house early. I wore a warm smile and efficiently helped with the final preparations, playing the role of the perfect hostess. "Cecile, thank you so much," my mother said, wrapping an arm around my shoulder with satisfaction. "I don't know what I'd do without you." But her words no longer warmed my heart as they once did. Instead, I was filled with cold, unwavering determination. The party started at 2 p.m., as planned. Guests began arriving one after another, and soon the living room was filled with laughter and cheerful conversations. Melinda, glowing with what appeared to be maternal bliss, graciously accepted all the congratulations and well wishes. As the time for presenting gifts approached, I quietly slipped upstairs and retrieved the materials I had prepared. The evidence was meticulously organized: photographs, message records, and proof of my parents' cover-up. All of it was neatly packaged inside a beautifully wrapped box. "It's time for presents," my mother called out cheerfully. "Melinda, everyone has chosen something special for you." One by one, gifts were unwrapped amid excited reactions. Baby clothes, toys, parenting books. Each gift was thoughtful and filled with love. Finally, it was my turn. "This is my gift to you, Melinda," I said. I spoke in a calm voice. "I prepared this with special meaning." Melinda nodded eagerly, her excitement evident. But the moment she opened the box, her face froze. Her hands began to tremble as soon as she saw the first photo inside. The colored photo clearly showed her and Sam in an intimate embrace. A few of the guests began noticing Melinda's sudden change. "Melinda, what's wrong?" my mother asked with concern. But her voice, too, was soon silenced. The contents of the photos were gradually becoming visible to those around us. "This is my special gift to you," I continued, my voice steady. "All the evidence gathered by the private investigation agency showing your relationship with Sam and—" I paused, shifting my gaze toward my parents. Their faces had already gone pale, and the evidence of Mom and Dad's efforts to cover it up. The room fell into a silence so heavy it was as if the air had frozen. The only sound was Melinda's soft sobbing. "Cecile, please, let me explain," she said, her voice shaking. "Explain," I replied, keeping my emotions in check. "With the mountain of evidence I've collected over 2 weeks, what explanation could you possibly offer?" Sam stood rigid, like a statue. His face was drained of color, and I could see his lips trembling slightly. "This is a misunderstanding." My father suddenly spoke, his voice raised. "Cecile, calm down. We shouldn't be airing family matters in front of so many people." "Family matters." I cut him off, raising my voice for the first time. "Who do you think has been paying for Melinda's education?" "Me. I've been covering her expenses ever since I got my job, and after betraying me, you're still calling this a family matter?" My mother tried to intervene, but I held up my hand to stop her. "That's enough. Look at this." I held up my phone, showing them the messages exchanged between them and Melinda. "Cecile must never find out. She's the one paying for your tuition. If she stops because of this, we'll be in serious trouble." I read my mother's message out loud, and a wave of murmurs rippled through the room. Melinda's friends exchanged uneasy glances, their confusion clear. "I was just a wallet to you," I said, my voice a mixture of sadness and anger. "A convenient sister, who kept paying for her younger sibling's education, and that same sister's husband was." And then it happened. Suddenly, chaos erupted. "You're disgusting." Melinda's boyfriend, consumed with rage, shouted and charged toward Sam. Despite being involved with Sam, Melinda had also been dating a male classmate. "You seduced Melinda, and now you're pretending like nothing happened? Say something." Just as Sam opened his mouth to respond, the boyfriend's fist connected with his face. Sam staggered backward and collapsed onto the table. The impact set off a chain reaction. The room erupted into complete chaos. "This bastard." Sam got up and lunged at the boyfriend, grabbing hold of him. Melinda collapsed into tears while my parents frantically tried to regain control of the situation, but it was already too late. The guests were slowly piecing the truth together, their voices filled with anger and disbelief. "How could this happen? I can't believe it." How could you do such a thing? I stood silently in the middle of the chaos. Was this the outcome I had wanted? A whirlwind of complex emotions churned inside me. Melinda continued sobbing, leaning into my parents for support. Her makeup was smeared with tears, and her carefully styled hair was now a mess. The radiant image of a celebrated mother-to-be was nowhere to be seen. Sam, with blood dripping from his nose, tried to get back on his feet. But he couldn't move under the weight of the cold, judgmental stares surrounding him. "Cecile." My mother called out to me in a trembling voice. "Please, no more." But I had already turned my back. As I walked toward the front door, I delivered my final words. "Melinda's tuition support ends today. I'll start the divorce process with Sam tomorrow, and..." I paused, briefly looking back. "Don't ever contact me again." I stepped outside, where the evening sky was beautifully painted in shades of orange and pink. It was as if the chaos from the past few hours had been nothing but a lie. But the noise still echoing from the house confirmed that this was all too real. I got into my car and exhaled deeply before starting the engine. It was over. No! This was the beginning. Gripping the steering wheel tightly, I reminded myself of that. In the back seat lay copies of the evidence. Photographs, message logs, and documentation gathered through the detective's investigation. I had spent over $1,500 on the investigation, a steep cost, but one I deemed necessary to uncover the truth. As I pulled out of the driveway, I glanced in the rearview mirror, watching my parents' house fade into the distance. The house I had lived in for over 20 years now felt like a stranger's home. There was no place for me there anymore. As the street lights began to flicker on one by one, I took my first step toward a new life. A week had passed since the party. At that time, my phone was filled with dozens of missed calls and unread messages, but I hadn't responded to a single one. Instead, I had spent the week focusing on rebuilding my life. The first thing I did was schedule a meeting with my lawyer. With the overwhelming evidence I had, the divorce proceedings were expected to go smoothly. Even Sam's response came surprisingly quickly, agreeing to the divorce without much resistance. He likely wanted to avoid further scandal. As for asset division, it will be split evenly by default, the lawyer explained. However, considering the evidence you've gathered, there's room for negotiation on more favorable terms. At work, I submitted a transfer request. Having worked in the same department as Sam, continuing there was no longer an option. Fortunately, a position had opened in the London branch's intermediary team, a position they had offered me before. "Cecile, you're welcome anytime," said the London HR director with a warm smile over the video call. "We're well aware of your accomplishments." I also wasted no time addressing my living situation. The luxury apartment in Manhattan was filled with memories of Sam. Instead, I found a loft in Brooklyn, a renovated space in an old factory. It had wide open spaces, large windows, and most importantly, the perfect atmosphere for a fresh start. But the most significant change was the one happening within me. The dependence and emotional attachment I had carried toward my family for years were slowly unraveling, like a heavy chain being lifted. For about 2 weeks, my parents persisted in trying to reach me. Emails, phone calls, even unexpected visits to my home. But I didn't respond to any of them. Melinda sent me several apology messages, but I deleted them without reading. "Cecile, please, listen to us." My mother pleaded in a desperate voicemail. "We're family, can't we?" But even those words failed to move me. The word family had never sounded so hollow. I immersed myself in work, focusing on my new beginning, when an unexpected visitor showed up one day. It was Melinda's best friend, Carol. She lived nearby and had known both Melinda and me since we were children. "Could you spare a moment to talk?" Carol was waiting for me in the office lobby. We moved to a nearby cafe, and I agreed to hear her out. "Melinda has dropped out of college," Carol said quietly. She's moved back into your parents' house and started working part-time. I silently stirred my coffee. She really regrets everything, Carol continued. But I support your decision. Sometimes, the truth can only be revealed in such a way. Carol's words unexpectedly resonated deeply within me. She was one of the few people who could see the situation from an entirely objective perspective. Thank you, I replied briefly. But I'm not going back. There was no hesitation in my voice. 2 years have passed since then. Living in London has brought countless changes into my life. A new environment, new people, and most importantly, a new version of myself. Work has been more fulfilling than I could have imagined. Collaborating with colleagues from diverse cultural backgrounds has expanded both my skills and my worldview. My career progressed quickly, and I am now the head of my department, leading major projects. My relationship with my parents and Melinda remains severed. Occasionally, I hear updates about them through mutual acquaintances, but it feels like listening to stories about strangers. Melinda never returned to college. She now works at a local supermarket and is raising her child as a single mother. My parents are busy helping her with childcare. The divorce from Sam took a year to finalize, but it's all settled now. I heard he left the company and relocated to the West Coast. Over these past 2 years, I've lost many things, but I've gained something far more valuable: self-trust, the courage to make decisions, and most importantly, the freedom to choose my own path in life. This is my new life. And this story is not an ending but a new beginning. Sometimes, life's greatest challenges come from those closest to us. But beyond those challenges lies a new light, waiting to be discovered. I now know that firsthand. My name is Michelle Brown. I am 29 years old and I run a cleaning business. Some might think of it as dirty work. It seems that my family especially thinks so. However, I take pride in my job. My company, Clean Life, which I started alone 7 years ago, has now grown into a mid-sized business employing 50 people, with annual sales exceeding $3 million. Yet, to my family, I was always just the janitor. This was particularly true for my brother Kevin. Kevin is 21 years old. He is studying medicine at a renowned private state university. His tuition fees amount to $60,000 per year. For the past 3 years, I have covered all the expenses that his student loans didn't, as our parents couldn't afford it, and I wanted to support Kevin's dream. Lately, I often reminisce about my childhood. I remember the day I held my newborn brother for the first time in the hospital waiting room when I was 8 years old. "Michelle, this is your brother Kevin," my mother said softly, guiding me as I held the baby with trembling hands. The warmth of that tiny life still lingers in my palms. "Please help take good care of Kevin as his big sister, won't you?" My father's words sowed a sense of responsibility in my young mind, which would shape my life thereafter. Our parents both worked, my father in a local small factory, and my mother part-time in a grocery shop. Although not wealthy, they worked tirelessly to prevent us siblings from experiencing hardship. Since elementary school, it was my routine to take care of Kevin after school, helping him with homework and making snacks. Although we fought at times, we cared for each other and were close siblings. Kevin's aspiration to become a doctor was sparked by an incident in the winter of his 2nd grade. He suddenly developed a high fever and severe cough. At first, we thought it was just a cold. However, that night, Kevin's breathing became labored. "Michelle, it's hard to breathe." I remember the midnight visit to the emergency room, his face pale and with an oxygen mask, rushed into the examination room. Diagnosed with severe pneumonia, he was immediately hospitalized. With our parents unable to take time off work, I, then a high school student, skipped school to care for him. "Don't worry, I'm here with you," I reassured Kevin as he lay crying with an IV drip. We stayed in a 4-person room. Kevin, weak under his oxygen mask, lay by the window. As his fever spiked at night and he tossed in his sleep, I would come after school and sometimes stay overnight to change his ice pillow and wipe his sweat. This girl really takes good care of her brother. I heard an elderly lady in the same room tell a nurse. 3 days into his hospitalization, Dr. Anderson came for a round. A kindly middle-aged doctor with a gentle smile, he reassured us, "You're doing well. You'll get better soon." Kevin nodded weakly. "The doctor is kind yet seems so reliable," Kevin murmured. A week into his stay, a little girl in the same room had a seizure at night. Dr. Anderson rushed in and skillfully handled the situation, with Kevin watching intently. "Amazing," he whispered in pure admiration. On the day of his discharge, Kevin thanked Dr. Anderson. "Dr. Anderson, I want to be a doctor like you in the future," he declared. Dr. Anderson smiled kindly. "Well then, you'd have to study hard. And remember to always be kind," he advised. "Yes, I'll do my best while learning from my sister," Kevin responded. As we left the hospital, Kevin looked back at the ward. "Michelle, I promise. I will become a doctor and help those in need," he said, his eyes shining like never before. That experience was what sparked Kevin's dream of becoming a doctor. Afterwards, I started working part-time in cleaning to help with household expenses and to contribute even a little towards my own tuition. Initially, I thought it was an embarrassing job. However, I soon realized that cleaning requires invisible effort and definite skills. My first job was at a small local clinic. Early in the morning, I polished the waiting room floor, wiped the windows, and cleaned the toilets. The clinic director once told me, "Thanks to you, Ms. Brown, our patients can receive their treatments in comfort." Those words profoundly changed my perspective on cleaning. "The place looks like it's brand new after you clean it up, Michelle," a customer once told me, a compliment I still cherish to this day. After graduating high school, I joined a major building maintenance company. Cleaning supports people's lives. I was drawn to this job believing this. While working on site, I learned the techniques and know-how of cleaning and management. In my second year with the company, I was entrusted with cleaning a large commercial facility, a crucial job overseeing more than 100 staff members. The cleaning work was relentless, from early morning at 4 a.m., before the store opened to late at night after it closed. Sometimes I had to manage both the late night and early morning shifts. Occasionally, I also had to work many hours of overtime to cover for staff who suddenly took leave. Those were incredibly busy days, but the experience became a valuable asset to me. Our cleaning staff included a diverse range of individuals, from elderly workers to housewives, each with their own circumstances. Elderly staff members, despite their excellent cleaning skills, often had to quit because their bodies could no longer keep up. In the break room, I heard part-time housewives with young children struggling to adjust their shifts. It was around this time that I began to think about starting my own business. I wanted to create a better working environment for the staff. I wanted to support people's lives through cleaning. That was my motivation. "Michelle, you are really suited for this job. You work diligently and notice even the smallest details." Encouraged by an older colleague's words, I began studying management. During breaks, I read articles for entrepreneurs, and on weekends, I attended management seminars. Gradually, my dream of starting my own business took on a concrete shape. Meanwhile, Kevin, who had reached middle school, was fiercely pursuing his goal of becoming a doctor. He was always at the top of his class at school. His desk was perpetually stacked with textbooks and workbooks. However, our family finances were tight, and we couldn't afford to send him to tutoring. Kevin's dedicated himself to his studies desperately. He arrived at school earlier than anyone else, and after classes, he stayed behind in the library to study. On weekends, he was at the state library from the moment it opened. "Kevin, you're working so hard every day. You'll surely become a wonderful doctor." My mother's words were filled with both pride and a tinge of sadness. I was just as desperate during his high school entrance exams. The high school Kevin wanted to attend had a slightly higher academic standard, but I didn't want him to give up. "Don't worry, I'll support you with all I've got," I told him, buying him reference books with my own salary. I also secretly bought him snacks when he seemed tired. On the eve of the exam, I stayed up late with him, calming his nerves. "Michelle, what if things don't go well tomorrow?" "Don't worry, you've done enough, Kevin." The joy of finding his examination number on the pass list on announcement day is still vivid in my memory. Kevin hugged me, crying. "It's all thanks to you, Michelle." "Thank you so much." At the age of 25, I resigned and finally decided to start my own company. I had saved $30,000 from my part-time jobs and as an employee, desperately accumulated over the years. I went around to banks with my business plan, but none took me seriously. The cleaning industry has too low an entry barrier. There's too much competition, they said. Starting a business as a woman is still seen as a risk. These words nearly crushed me repeatedly, but I did not give up. My first job was through an introduction from an older colleague from my part-time days. It was routine cleaning at an elementary school where her friend worked. The salary was low, but this was the start of my company. "Ms. Brown, you clean so meticulously. We're grateful to have you here." The vice principal's words led to the next job. It was office cleaning for a company owned by the PTA president. I worked alone from early morning till late at night. During the day, I was on site. At night, I handled accounting and sales. There was no time to rest, but every day was fulfilling. One late night while cleaning an office, a young employee who was working overtime approached me. "Ms. Brown, it must be tough working so late every day." "No, I'm happy to be of help to someone." That conversation led him to introduce me to clean his company's office. Gradually, I began to receive more jobs and became busier. I was able to hire a few employees, and the company was doing well. Then one day, a fateful call came. "Michelle, I got into medical school." Kevin's excited voice came through the phone. His dream had finally come true. "Kevin, I'm coming right away." After receiving the call, I couldn't stay put. I rushed to the university during a break at work. The moment we found his name among the accepted students, we hugged and rejoiced together. However, our parents' expressions were complex. Medical school tuition is over $50,000 a year. My mother's voice trembled. "We can't afford that." "I'll pay for it," I blurted out without thinking. The company was doing well, but sourcing such a significant amount every year was not easy. "Michelle, that's too much for you," my father said, concern etched on his face. "It's okay. I want to do everything I can for Kevin's dream." Overwhelmed with gratitude, Kevin burst into tears. "Michelle, I will definitely repay your kindness." Inspired by his words, I worked even harder. Every day, I went out to secure new contracts, striving to minimize labor costs by working on site myself. Seeing my relentless work, one of my employees approached me. "You're pushing yourself too hard. Let us help with what we can." I took his words to heart and began delegating more tasks gradually. The company steadily grew, and the number of employees increased. However, in exchange, I drastically cut back on my personal life. I refrained from buying new clothes and worked even on holidays. Yet, whenever I saw Kevin striving in medical school, all my fatigue seemed to vanish. However, Kevin's acceptance into medical school gradually changed our parents. The first sign of change was at a family memorial service. "Our Kevin has been accepted into medical school," my mother proudly told each relative. With each telling, she received praises like, "Impressive," and "How commendable," and her face lit up with pride. When an aunt asked, "Is Michelle still in the cleaning business?" my mother's face clouded over slightly, and she answered vaguely, "Well, yes." My father also changed. He began to bring up Kevin at his weekly chess gatherings. "My son says he's going to be a neurosurgeon." "Ah, your son is really something else." The accolades from his peers seemed to inflate his ego gradually. One evening during dinner, while I was discussing a new contract at work, my father interjected, "Michelle, How long do you plan to keep doing that kind of job? My mother chimed in. Right. Kevin's classmate might introduce him to a medical office job. It's much better than cleaning. My heart froze at my mother's dismissive reference to my job as just cleaning. As Kevin's performance in medical school became known for its excellence, our parents' attitudes escalated further. They began to boast to our neighbors and at the hospital during his internships. Our son is so well regarded by the doctors. He might stay on at the university hospital. My mother's voice would rise with each story. During the end-of-year cleaning, as I tried to teach some professional cleaning tips, my mother looked at me with a hesitant expression. Michelle, it seems this kind of job suits you. My father even began planning his retirement, banking on Kevin's future success. Once Kevin becomes a doctor, we won't have to worry about our old age. Working at a big hospital, he'll easily make over $200,000 a year. He speculated. Conversations at home gradually revolved solely around Kevin. I felt as if my existence was fading into the background. At family gatherings, my mother started avoiding topics about my work. Michelle is. Well, she's managing, she would say, quickly followed by. But Kevin. One day at a neighborhood Christmas party, a decisive moment came. Your son is in medical school? That's really impressive. A neighbor commented. My mother responded proudly. Yes, perhaps it's a result of our upbringing. We've inspired him to pursue a dream in healthcare. I was shocked by her expression at that moment. It seemed my daily efforts to pay his tuition had been erased from my parents' memory. My decision to leave home stemmed from these experiences. Keeping a reasonable distance, I managed to maintain a relationship with my family. However, a significant event soon shattered our family dynamic. It began in the autumn of Kevin's senior year in medical school. Kevin started dating a fellow medical student, Tiffany. They met during an internship at the university hospital. She was talented and beloved by everyone. Kevin was instantly smitten. Tiffany is the only daughter of a family that runs one of the top general hospitals in New York. Kevin's voice over the phone held a note of pride. It turned out her father was the director of a general hospital. That's amazing. But I'd like to know more about her. Can you introduce me sometime? Yeah. Sure. But it's exam period now, so maybe later. This exchange was repeated many times. Even after a year of dating, I had yet to meet Tiffany. At first, I didn't mind. Medical school is busy, and I was busy with work too. But a sense of discomfort lingered. One day on my way home from work, I accidentally saw Kevin and Tiffany in front of a high-end restaurant, chatting happily. Just as I was about to call out to them, I saw Kevin's expression darken. He hurriedly ushered Tiffany inside the restaurant, pretending not to notice me. At that moment, I couldn't understand why my brother was avoiding me. Then, that call came. Michelle, about this year's Christmas party. My mother's voice carried an unusual weight. Maybe it's better if you don't come this year. I was taken aback for a moment, doubting what I just heard. Our family's Christmas party was a never-interrupted tradition, one I had always attended no matter how busy I was, even when I started my company or during delicate times in our family relationships. Since my childhood, this party has been a cherished memory filled with my mother's homemade cakes, my father dressed as Santa Claus, and exchanging handmade gifts with Kevin. It was a precious time to affirm our family bonds. What do you mean? Well, Kevin is bringing Tiffany, and her parents will be coming too. My mother's words were hesitant, as if hiding something. That moment brought back memories of the past, the night I stayed up caring for Kevin when he had a fever in elementary school, and the days I encouraged him during his middle school entrance exams. Those memories now felt like a distant past. The truth came directly from Tiffany herself. In fact, I had already met her a few months back. It was a fateful encounter on the day of a cleaning service bid at the General Hospital. After finishing a presentation with other contractors, I was checking documents for the next project in the hallway when a hurried woman nearly bumped into me. Oh, "I'm sorry," said the young woman in a lab coat, apologizing deeply. While thinking she looked familiar, I glanced at her name tag. It read, Tiffany Owen. Realizing she was Kevin's girlfriend, I couldn't help but speak up. "Are you Kevin's?" She looked surprised. "Yes, but I'm Michelle, Kevin's sister." Tiffany appeared momentarily perplexed but quickly smiled warmly. "Oh, I've heard a lot about you from Kevin, but he never showed me a photo." Our conversation naturally flowed, and before I knew it, we were deeply engaged in discussion. Tiffany was an intelligent and kind woman. I could see why Kevin was smitten. "Could we keep this between us?" Tiffany suggested. "I think it would surprise him. He would be surprised when we reveal to him we've become good friends." I thought it sounded fun and agreed to keep our meeting a secret. However, looking back, perhaps Tiffany wanted to keep it secret out of consideration for me. We occasionally met for coffee after that. Then, the day after my mother called about the Christmas party, Tiffany contacted me. "Michelle, there's something I need to talk to you about." Her voice trembling. We met at our usual cafe, her eyes red as if she had been crying. "Michelle, I can't stand it anymore," she said, her voice shaking. "About the Christmas party. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but I think you have the right to know." Tiffany took a deep breath and began to speak. She had accidentally overheard a conversation between Kevin and my mother. She heard them saying, "Tiffany's family shouldn't find out that his sister is a janitor." That phrase struck me like a sharp blade. If they find out about Michelle being a janitor, Tiffany's parents might not accept our relationship, and it could even affect my future career prospects. I felt as if my 24 years bond with my brother crumbled in an instant. Kevin had proposed excluding me from family gatherings, seeing me as an obstacle to his future. When I heard these words, something quietly but surely broke inside me. More shocking was my parents' reaction. "Don't worry, Michelle will understand. Considering your future. The world of medicine is really special." They seemed to sympathize with Kevin's reasoning, as if my feelings as a daughter were less important than maintaining a social facade for my brother. Since childhood, I had lived with the phrase, "because you're the big sister," and sacrificing for my brother had seemed natural. But now, that natural felt profoundly unstable. Tiffany continued, "Actually, I've kept it a secret from Kevin for a long time, but my mother has been a janitor at a hospital for over 20 years. She met my father there and they married, but she continued to work even after marriage. She worked with pride." Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke. My mother always said, "Cleaning is an important job that protects people's lives." Deep gratitude for her mother shone in Tiffany's eyes. I pretended I didn't hear their conversation and said at the Christmas party, "I'd like to meet your sister." Then Kevin. He called the cleaning job embarrassing and referred to you as just a janitor. Tiffany's tears spilled over as she spoke. I can't believe them anymore. They're people who think of my mother's job in such a way, Tiffany said as she looked down, trembling. That night, I stayed late at the office, lost in thought in front of my computer. Displayed on the monitor was the payment history for Kevin's tuition fees, amounting to over $100,000 over 4 years. I had covered his day-to-day expenses and the shortfall in his tuition by taking out loans, on top of my own contributions. It was the crystallization of my sweat and tears. The nightscape visible from the office window seemed lonelier than usual. A janitor's sister. The phrase echoed in my mind like a haunting refrain. I am proud of my job. I support people's lives and maintain the environment. It is by no means a job to be ashamed of. Days of sleeplessness filled with anger came, followed with sadness. The next day, I received a brief message from Tiffany. I've decided to break up with Kevin. I cannot be with someone who dismisses my mother's life like that. Michelle, thank you for everything. Perhaps deep down, I had sensed this outcome, but I hadn't expected it to come so soon. That night, I made a difficult decision. I stopped paying Kevin's tuition fees. A few days later, a notice of unpaid tuition arrived at the university for Kevin. Confused and angry calls came from both my parents and Kevin. "What is this? Didn't you promise to pay for the tuition fees?" My mother's voice was frantic. "Michelle, what happened? Kevin's future depends on this." My mother cried, and my father yelled at me. But my resolve was firm. If having a janitor for a sister is embarrassing, then you don't need assistance from me. I responded calmly, "Let Kevin find his own path. It will surely be a good experience for him." Kevin, in a panic, called me. "Michelle, please, pay the tuition fee." "Why?" I asked calmly. "Am I not just a shameful janitor?" "That's not it. I was wrong. I'm sorry." "Kevin," I said quietly, "you were ashamed of my job, of my existence, yet you still want to accept my money. Our parents called every relative, but no one offered to help Kevin. Ever since Kevin had entered medical school, our parents' haughty attitude had exhausted our relatives' patience. Eventually, Kevin decided to apply for a scholarship and started a part-time job. A month later, Kevin visited my workplace. He had lost a lot of weight. "Michelle, I'm truly sorry," he said, apologizing deeply. "I've applied for a scholarship and started a part-time job. I'm going to continue my studies on my own." His voice lacked its former arrogance. The situation with Tiffany made me realize. She told me how important and honorable cleaning work is, how wonderful the job you do is. Someone who doesn't understand that shouldn't be a doctor. I listened silently to his words. "Your company. It's really impressive. I didn't realize it before. I'm truly sorry. Entering medical school made me think I was better than others." His eyes surveyed my office. "There's nothing to be ashamed of anymore. Rather, I'm proud. Seeing the smiles of the people working at your company made me understand," he said. I spoke after a moment's thought. "From now on, you stand on your own, but if you're really in trouble, you can come to me." Kevin nodded, tears in his eyes. "Thank you. But I'll try to do it on my own as much as I can. I think that's how I can apologize to you." Months passed, and Kevin truly changed. He worked part-time at a local clinic on weekends and as a tutor on weekday evenings. Kevin began to visit sometimes to talk about his experiences in medical school and his future dreams. "I want to open a clinic in the community in the future. Not one for the wealthy, but a place where everyone can feel secure." His eyes no longer held vanity or pretense, but a firm resolve. From time to time, my mother called. "Michelle, I'm really sorry for trampling over your feelings," her voice laden with deep regret. My father sent a letter. "Michelle, my daughter, I am proud of your strength. We were wrong. If you can forgive us, let's be a family again." I've put off responding. I need time. But I believe that one day we can come together as a family again. A year later, Kevin started an internship at a local clinic, which, incidentally, my company was contracted to clean. Dr. Kevin really understands the patient's feelings. A nurse commented one day. Kevin chatted amiably with the janitors and became a doctor who empathized with his patients' anxieties. Now our sibling bonds might be stronger than before, not based on ideals or pretenses, but on a reality where we understand each other. And Kevin came to understand the true value of cleaning work. It's not just cleaning. It's a job that proudly supports people's health and peace of mind. I am Vanessa, a woman in my mid-30s. I work as an office clerk and lead a very regular life every day. My family consisted of 4 people: my mother, my sister Michelle, and our father, who recently passed away. From a young age, I felt a particularly deep bond with my father among my family members. He was a quiet and gentle man, but became resolute when needed to protect us, always a reliable presence. His warm gaze and his quiet yet powerful words were always a source of support for me. I have countless memories with my father. Every Sunday, we would take care of the flower beds together in the garden. I vividly remember how he would lift me gently when I fell and cried at my elementary school sports day, and how he enjoyed taking photos more than anyone else during family trips. I particularly remember the day I first learned to ride a bicycle. Despite nearly falling several times, he never let go, supporting me throughout. That image of my father is an irreplaceable treasure for me. Even when I was troubled at work, he would say, "Vanessa, believe in what you want to do," encouraging me repeatedly. His words were always precise, pushing me forward strongly. Losing him was the greatest sorrow of my life. The grief that welled up from the depths of my heart was so profound that it felt like it was crushing me. My father passed away a few weeks ago. He had been in and out of the hospital for about a year due to illness, but the last few months were spent in continuous care at the hospital. The meals brought to his hospital room couldn't have tasted good to him. Yet, I vividly remember how he happily munched on the fruits we brought him. I visited his hospital room almost daily after work. Whenever I visited, he would greet me with a smile. Despite his frailty, the sight of his smile whenever he saw me was a great encouragement. He was always more concerned about my work and personal life than his own, but he had confided to my mother that he felt his physical strength declining and that it was hard. My mother, without telling me this, always supported him resolutely. She tried to alleviate some of his pain by massaging him and playing his favorite music. We had been told by the doctor that his time might be limited, so we thought we were prepared. However, when the time actually came, I couldn't accept the reality. When I witnessed his last moments in the hospital room, the serenity of him closing his eyes peacefully left a huge void in my heart. The warmth of my father, his gentle voice, and his smile seemed to have disappeared from my world forever. After the funeral, memories of my father remained vividly within me. Every time I returned home, I seemed to see his smiling face. Opening the front door, I would hear his gentle voice saying, "Welcome back," making me turn around again and again. Even during dinners with my family, I would suddenly think, if only father were here, and my heart would tighten. My mother was also grieving, but she tried to stay strong to support me and Michelle. I was always impressed by her strength. As for my sister Michelle, she seemed to handle the funeral and other procedures in a business-like manner, almost as if it were someone else's concern, which unsettled me. Michelle had always been a wild character, causing endless trouble for our parents. During her school days, she had been called to the school many times, troubling our parents. Nevertheless, they never gave up on Michelle and continued to shower her with love. Since marrying a man who works at a major bank a few years ago, she hardly visited our family home. At the wedding, I remember how my father looked at Michelle with genuine happiness. Even after our father's health declined, she stayed in contact but never visited. She couldn't have known how much our father missed her. However, she showed up on the day of the funeral, seeming more excited about the inheritance than saddened by our father's death. While we were overwhelmed with grief, Michelle was all about the inheritance, leaving me at a loss for words. Amidst all this, the discussion about dividing my father's estate began. One day, with a lawyer present, the whole family gathered to open my father's will. The atmosphere was somber, but I also felt a mix of anticipation and anxiety about what our father had left us. I wondered how his deep love would connect us. The lawyer began reading the will. First, it was revealed that the house and land were left to my mother, which was a natural outcome, and she quietly accepted it with a nod. Then it was announced that Michelle would inherit $130,000 in cash. Hearing this, Michelle chuckled and said, "As expected, Dad did the right thing." Her words carried no hint of sadness, only a focus on the money. Then it was my turn. I couldn't believe what the lawyer said next. "Vanessa will receive a cassette player." The last thing handed to me was just an old cassette player. I couldn't help but utter in shock. I couldn't understand what had happened and just stared at the lawyer. When I asked if there had been some mistake, The lawyer calmly replied, "This was your father's clear intention." Even after hearing this explanation, my doubts were not cleared, and I was simply bewildered. I couldn't comprehend my father's true intentions and was only confused. Michelle looked at the cassette player and sneered, "Can you even call that an inheritance?" Her insensitive words pierced deep into my heart. I couldn't understand why my father had left me such a thing, feeling completely disregarded. It felt as if I were worthless to him. Trying to calm me, my mother said gently, "Vanessa, your father must have had his reasons." However, those words only deepened the wound in my heart. If he had his reasons, why didn't he explain them to me? Receiving just an old cassette player, was I really cherished as his daughter? Such doubts began to arise, deeply hurting me. Was my bond with my father truly solid? These doubts wounded my heart deeply. I returned home and placed the cassette player on the table, staring at it intently. No matter how hard I looked, I couldn't feel that it was anything special. Sitting before what seemed like mere junk, anger and frustration swirled within me. Why only me? This thought dominated me. "Dad, why did you leave this to me?" Every time I voiced these words, my heart ached. I had thought that my father and I were especially closely bonded within our family. I remember how he spent a lot of time with me from my childhood. He would sit with me at the desk and solve problems together when I struggled with my studies, and we enjoyed walks just the two of us in the park on weekends. Following my father and talking about various things during those times was irreplaceable for me. Why had he left me such an unfair inheritance? Unable to accept it, I struggled to hold back the tears. Crying wouldn't bring my father back. I had to remind myself of that. However, I reconsidered, thinking, this is something my father left for me, and decided to check if it still worked. I pressed the power button and tried the play button, but the cassette player did not respond at all. Even when I inserted a cassette, there was no sound, not even the hum of the motor. It might be broken, I thought disappointedly, but I felt reluctant to just discard something my father had left me. I couldn't help but think that perhaps my father's love was hidden within this broken cassette player, and I couldn't bring myself to give up on it. The next day, I took it to a repair shop. When I explained to the clerk that it was not working and asked for repairs, they said, "It's quite old. It might take some time, but we'll take a look." As I left the cassette player at the shop and walked home, I was filled with mixed emotions. If this is meant to reveal my father's true intentions, could something be hidden within it? I wondered, but time passed without any answers. As I waited for the cassette player to be repaired, I found myself repeatedly thinking of my father and was overwhelmed by deep sadness. While waiting for the repair to be completed, I decided to continue sorting through my father's belongings. His room was filled with his favorite desk, bookshelf, and numerous photos of us as a family. Each time I touched these items, memories of my father vividly came back to life. In every photo, he had a gentle smile. Each time I remembered that smile, my heart warmed. One day, I found a cassette tape in an old box. It was labeled, "To Vanessa," in my father's handwriting. My hands trembled with surprise and emotion, and I hurriedly called the repair shop. "If the cassette player is fixed, I'd like to pick it up immediately," I said. The clerk replied, "The repair has just been completed," and I immediately went to the shop. A tape recorded with a message from my father. With anticipation and anxiety, my heart thumped loudly. When I got home, I immediately inserted the cassette and pressed play. After a moment of silence, my father's calm voice filled the room. Tears welled up in my eyes the instant I heard his voice, which sounded as if he were alive, gently echoing in my ears. "Vanessa, if you are listening to this, I am no longer in this world." His voice was nostalgic, as if he were speaking right in front of me. As I listened, my father's words deeply penetrated my heart. "Vanessa, thank you for everything. You've helped me in so many ways. Thanks to you supporting your mother and Michelle, I was able to spend my days in peace. But there's something I want only you to know. I've entrusted something very important to you. Please find it. It's in the storage shed." The moment I heard those words, my heart raced. What could this important thing that my father mentioned be? Although the cassette didn't specify the exact location, I was determined to find it, feeling that by doing so, I could reconnect with my father. From the next day, I began searching every corner of our house. My father's room, the storage shed, even the basement. These were all places he cherished, but I found nothing that seemed right. However, I didn't give up, and after several days of searching, I finally found a small safe in the back of the storage room. The excitement of finding the safe was indescribable. The safe matched the key to my father's desk, and I was able to open it immediately. Inside were several beautifully crafted antique watches, clearly the result of years of collection. The moment I opened the safe, I was breathless. The beautiful watches shimmered like jewels. Dad. I remembered seeing him wear these watches occasionally and couldn't stop my tears. Every time I looked at the watches, I was reminded of my father's gentle smile, which made my heart ache. I had the watch collection appraised by an expert, and it turned out to be worth over $500,000. At that moment, I felt as if I finally understood what my father had been trying to tell me. The true value of things is not measured by their appearance or price. Think about the meaning behind things. My father's teaching resonated deeply with me. I realized that my father had left me something truly valuable, not in terms of money, but in what really matters. This discovery was a poignant moment for me, but at the same time, I had no inkling of the turmoil that this collection would later cause. At that time, I had no idea that this event was just the beginning of a major upheaval that would involve my family. When I told my mother about it, she nodded quietly and smiled. "That's just like your father. I think he wanted to tell you something more than just money." Her words brought me some solace, but the calm did not last long. Her smile seemed to envelop me gently. A few days later, my sister Michelle visited our family home. My mother and I were living together at our family home, but she had moved out several years ago. As I was drinking coffee in the living room, Michelle entered somewhat forcefully through the front door and immediately said to me, "I heard that the watch collection is worth over $500,000. Is that true?" I was momentarily taken aback by her question, but thinking that lying was pointless, I replied, "Yes, that's what Dad entrusted to me." At that moment, Michelle's expression visibly changed and she frowned, her tone becoming more forceful. "Isn't that weird? We're sisters, so why is it so unfair? Dad's inheritance should be divided equally among us." I chose my words carefully and responded, "But this was something Dad entrusted to me through his will and a cassette tape. Michelle, you have $130,000 in cash. Isn't that enough?" However, Michelle showed no signs of being convinced. "That doesn't matter. I should have a right to that collection too." Her attitude, becoming more aggressive, left me at a loss for words. "Well, fine. I have work, so I'm going back, but I'll come again." With that, Michelle left our house. Her words deeply hurt me, filling me with anxiety. After that, Michelle frequently criticized me. Dad always treated Vanessa specially, or Vanessa always gets more. She would say, as if I were monopolizing everything. Michelle's words pierced my heart like thorns, causing me great distress. I didn't want to let her into the house, but since she also had a key to our family home, there was nothing I could do. I tried to respond to my sister as calmly as possible, but I gradually felt my spirit wearing down. Michelle's attacks cornered me mentally and left me exhausted both emotionally and physically. Michelle had always favored glamorous things, wearing luxury brands and enjoying meals at fancy restaurants had become her routine. With a sociable personality, she was always surrounded by people and loved attending glamorous parties. She had married a successful banker a few years ago and, on the surface, seemed to lead a wealthy and stable life. The initial years of her marriage were peaceful and happy. Her husband had a solid character, sincere in his work, and valued family. However, Michelle's spending habits remained unchanged, and after their marriage, she continued to buy luxury brands and frequently enjoyed overseas trips. At first, her husband tolerated her lavish lifestyle, but he gradually began to question it. "Michelle, shouldn't you consider saving a bit?" Every time her husband mentioned it, Michelle would laugh it off, saying, "I want to enjoy my life." However, his dissatisfaction built up over time, and gradually a cold atmosphere began to dominate their relationship. Michelle continued to prioritize her desires, ignoring her husband's concerns. During this period, Michelle started gambling. What began as mere fun quickly turned into a serious habit, as she began to gamble large amounts of money. As her losses accumulated, she kept telling herself, "Next time I'll win," and gambled even more. As a result, her debts ballooned to an amount she could no longer hide from her husband. No one was able to stop Michelle as she spiraled deeper into her gambling addiction. When her husband discovered the debts, their relationship completely broke down. Furious, he declared, "I can't overlook this any longer," and began to prepare for divorce. However, already burdened with a substantial amount of debt, Michelle found it difficult to manage without her husband's financial support. Desperate, she began to consider tapping into the family's assets. Abandoned by her husband, Michelle was financially cornered and placed in a desperate situation. One day, when I returned home from work, I sensed something was off. An eerie silence enveloped the house, different from the usual. Just as I had suggested to my mother that we change the locks, although the front door was securely locked, something felt oddly misplaced. Glancing around the living room, I noticed a slight disarray at one corner of the shelf where my father's watch collection was displayed. The unnaturally empty space made me feel uneasy. A sense of foreboding washed over me, and I hurried to check the collection. Then, in the next moment, I was at a loss for words. Several watches had disappeared without a trace. I was struck by a chilling sensation. Could it be? For a moment, my mind was in turmoil, flooded with disbelief. Was it theft or just a misunderstanding? I searched every corner of the room, but the missing watches were nowhere to be found. With a sinking feeling, I opened a well-known online auction site. I entered the details of the watches and hit the search button. Among the search results displayed on the screen, I recognized one of the watches. The name of the seller was Michelle. This can't be. My hands trembled, and a lump formed in my throat. I couldn't believe that my own sister would try to sell our father's mementos in such a manner. I immediately called Michelle. "Michelle, what is this about? Did you take Dad's watches?" Michelle's voice was surprisingly calm. "You noticed quite quickly. It's family inheritance, so don't I have a right to it?" Struggling to contain my anger, I managed to say, "Those were precious items Dad entrusted to me. How could you take them without permission?" But Michelle was unapologetic. "Don't make such a big deal out of it. They're just antiques, right? If they're valuable, it's better to turn them into money," she retorted. Her words deeply wounded me, and I trembled with anger. At that moment, I realized that further discussion was futile. Hearing her refer to the watches, filled with our father's memories, as just antiques, made it clear that nothing I said would make a difference. I took a deep breath and made a quiet resolution. This could not go unresolved. I immediately reported the situation to the police. My father's legacy could not be trampled upon. I was resolute. The police quickly started an investigation and confirmed that Michelle had entered my home without permission and taken the watches. But that was not all. As the investigation progressed, it became clear that she had accumulated a huge gambling debt and was attempting to dispose of the family's assets illegally to pay it off. Michelle's crimes were far greater than she had imagined. The investigators carefully gathered evidence, and once the situation was clear, an arrest warrant was issued. A few days later, Michelle was arrested by the police. Michelle's arrest was a shocking event for me. I had never imagined my sister could become a criminal. When I heard that Michelle had been arrested, I felt a complex mix of emotions. While I was relieved that she would face justice, I also felt an indescribable sense of loss that our family bonds were completely shattered. Michelle's arrest left a deep scar on my heart. At the moment of her arrest, Michelle became frantic and tried desperately to resist. "Wait. This is a mistake. It's just a family issue." But the police calmly handcuffed her and stated firmly, "Your actions constitute theft. We'll discuss this further at the police station." Michelle continued to struggle, but as she noticed the stares from those around her, her face gradually paled. For the first time, fear and regret appeared in her eyes. Michelle's face was etched with despair. When I heard that Michelle had been taken to the police station, I let out a deep breath. While I had to accept this as fact, mixed feelings about whether this was the best outcome crossed my mind. Now that her crimes were revealed, it was only right that she be judged under the law, but I still could not completely sever the feelings I had for her as my sister. My heart was swirling with complex emotions. As the police interrogation progressed, the details of Michelle's crimes were gradually revealed. Not only had she entered my home without permission and taken the watches, but she had also illegally sold off family assets in the past and used the funds for gambling. There was also a suggestion that she had been involved in illegal transactions to repay her debts. Michelle's crimes far exceeded what anyone could have imagined. During the interrogation, Michelle repeatedly claimed, "I was just trying to share the family inheritance." However, her excuses did not hold up against the clear evidence. The police determined her actions to be a clear case of theft, and it was decided that she would be formally charged. Michelle's fate was to be judged by the law. On the day of the trial, Michelle stood in the courtroom, her demeanor uneasy, occasionally looking down. Her lawyer argued, "This is a family matter and too severe to be considered a criminal case." But the judge spoke sternly. "Your actions are not just a family issue. You betrayed trust and deliberately attempted to steal assets, which is a crime that cannot be overlooked socially." At those words, Michelle seemed to truly understand the gravity of the situation for the first time. She shivered, bit her lip, and struggled to hold back tears. Michelle's face was filled with regret and despair. Ultimately, Michelle received a suspended sentence. She avoided prison, but her record as a criminal remained, and her social credibility was completely lost. Michelle was shunned by society. After the trial, I met my mother outside the courthouse. She sighed quietly and murmured, "I never expected it to come to this." Her voice was tinged with the helpless feeling of a parent who has lost a child. My mother's heart was filled with deep sorrow. After receiving her guilty verdict, Michelle's life rapidly fell apart. The first thing that hit her was the collapse of her family. Michelle's downfall was something no one had anticipated. Following the public revelation of the trial's outcome, Michelle's husband decided he could no longer endure their life together and resolved to divorce her. Their relationship had already been cold, but with Michelle's crimes brought to light, her husband proceeded with the divorce without any sentiment. During the division of assets, he took a firm stance with his lawyers and left Michelle with almost nothing. Michelle was completely abandoned by her husband. As a result, she was forced to leave the luxurious home that was in her husband's name and moved into an old apartment in the suburbs. Michelle's life was completely transformed. Her new home was starkly different from her previous lavish lifestyle. The furniture was minimal, and due to financial constraints, she often couldn't afford heating. The days surrounded by luxurious dinners and high-end brands were behind her, and now she was reduced to hunting for specials at the supermarket. Michelle's living conditions had become drastically poorer compared to her past life. Michelle's financial situation continued to deteriorate. Burdened with overwhelming debt even after the trial, she found herself in a situation where she had to work incessantly, day and night. Juggling multiple part-time jobs and enduring long hours of labor, she was constantly chased by the need to pay off the interest on her debts. Michelle spent her days utterly exhausted. Amid this harsh lifestyle, Michelle's health began to decline as well. The glamour she once had completely vanished, replaced by a gaunt face deeply etched with fatigue. As she fell into despair, the friends who once surrounded her distanced themselves, leaving her utterly alone. Michelle had become completely isolated. There was one instance when she reached out through our mother for help, asking for just a little money. Her voice was no longer assertive but weak and fragile. My mother and I struggled for days with how to respond. Michelle is clearly desperate, but given her past actions, we can't be sure she would use the money wisely. My mother pondered this repeatedly, and I shared her concerns. Ultimately, we decided to respond by saying, "We won't provide money, but if you have specific problems, we can talk about them." However, after that, we received no further communication from Michelle. She couldn't accept our conditions. We hardly knew anything about Michelle's subsequent life. Occasionally, we would hear rumors about her continuing to work night shifts to pay off her debts and her increasingly difficult life. Gradually, Michelle faded from our memories. My mother and I rarely mentioned her name, while my mother reminded herself, "This is the path Michelle chose for herself." She occasionally showed a wistful expression. Her heart was filled with deep love for her daughter. One day, while dining with my mother, I mentioned, "I hope Michelle is doing well somewhere." After a moment of thought, my mother nodded slightly. "Yes, I hope so too." We never knew the details of what happened to Michelle afterward. Silently, I hoped that one day she would be able to turn her life around and atone for her past mistakes. I truly wished, from the bottom of my heart, that Michelle would find happiness one day. December 24th, 1999, Christmas Eve night. Cold rain streaked across the windows of St. Mary's Hospital. Nicole, 21 years old, sat beside the hospital bed of her husband, Raphael, cradling their newborn daughter, Meryl, in her arms. The white hospital walls were adorned with Christmas decorations crafted by the nurses. There was no joy of Christmas. Instead, a heavy atmosphere enveloped the room. Memories of meeting Raphael resurfaced in Nicole's mind as if it were just yesterday. 2 years ago, Raphael was a regular at the cafe where Nicole worked part-time. A literature student, he always carried thick books in his hands. Over time, through brief conversations, Nicole found herself drawn to his inner self. Falling in love with him was like a refreshing breeze of youth, filled with joy. Campus dates, picnics in the park, movie nights at the theater. With the recklessness of youth, they decided to get married after 6 months. However, their determination was unwavering. The wedding was small but heartfelt. Nicole's salary was modest, and Raphael was still a student, so they had no luxuries. But for them, it was enough. They believed that as long as they had love, nothing else mattered. When they found out Nicole was pregnant, they felt unparalleled happiness. Nicole attended university during the day and worked multiple part-time jobs at night. Raphael, too, continued his studies as long as his health allowed. Their future seemed bright and full of hope. "She looks like you," Raphael said weakly. His body grew weaker with each passing moment due to his illness. "No, she looks like you," Nicole replied with a smile. Baby Meryl, oblivious to her parents' conversation, slept peacefully, her gentle breaths filling the room. The weight of her tiny life pressed tenderly into Nicole's arms. Raphael smiled faintly. Despite his condition, that smile seemed to light up the entire room. "Make Meryl happy." His voice faltered. "Of course. But you too. You'll get better soon. The 3 of us as a family." She couldn't finish her sentence. The doctor's expressions had already said it all. Raphael's condition was far more severe than expected, and the treatments had little effect. Raphael shook his head slowly. Perhaps he instinctively knew his time was short. His eyes didn't reflect resignation but rather a deep love. "Please, Nicole, promise me." "I promise," Nicole said, gripping Raphael's hand tightly. She had never felt his hand so cold. That smile became Raphael's final gift. As night fell, his breathing grew weaker. Nicole clung desperately to his hand, but fate had decided to tear apart their young love. A little past midnight, Raphael quietly took his last breath. At that moment, The hospital clock struck midnight, and Christmas bells rang faintly in the distance. Holding her baby, Nicole wept in the hospital corridor. Outside, the rain poured harder. The Christmas tree's lights cast flickering reflections along the hallway. In that light, Nicole made a vow. No matter what, she would protect Meryl. She would love her and ensure her happiness. From that night on, Nicole's life changed drastically. She dropped out of university and searched for full-time work. During the day, she worked in sales, and at night, she taught herself programming. Her sister Lizzie, who lived nearby, helped care for Meryl. Through relentless effort, Nicole ensured Meryl could live a life of comfort. She gave her daughter countless toys and trips abroad. Whatever her daughter wished for, she provided. She believed that was how love should be expressed, and she thought it was the way to fulfill her promise to Raphael. Her mission was to never let her daughter feel lonely. But now, that conviction was beginning to waver. The promise she had kept for 23 years was questioning her in an unexpected way. What is true love? What is true happiness? Nicole realized she needed to find the answers from now on. In the spring of 2024, the aroma of coffee filled the living room of Nicole's home. This house, located in an upscale neighborhood in the suburbs of New York, symbolized her success. However, that morning, the atmosphere was unusually tense. "Mom, I need to talk to you about the wedding," Meryl said from across the table. Her voice carried the familiar tone of a daughter still accustomed to leaning on her mother. At 23 years old, Meryl had lived a life of luxury and comfort. She was the epitome of a young person accustomed to having the latest gadgets and indulging in an extravagant lifestyle. As Nicole looked at her daughter, a thought crossed her mind. Did Meryl truly resemble Raphael? Certainly, her outward appearance had Raphael's refined features. But Nicole didn't sense much of Raphael's kindness, empathy for others, or, above all, his strong will. "Marty and I booked the Grand Plaza Hotel," Meryl said, her voice brimming with excitement. "Usually there's a 2-year wait, but thanks to Marty's connections, we got a cancellation slot for next month." Nicole picked up her coffee cup, listening intently to her daughter's words. Marty, whom Meryl had met a year ago, was a rising star in the investment analysis world. Nicole's instincts as a businesswoman, however, sensed something off about him. How much are you planning to spend?" "Well," Meryl replied, scrolling through her smartphone, "the venue costs $50,000. Then the dress is $30,000. Flowers are $20,000. Catering is another $30,000. Music and photography come to $20,000. She listed the amounts, ticking them off on her fingers as though reciting a grocery list. "That's about $150,000 altogether. But that's normal, right? I heard Lucy's wedding cost $200,000. Nicole's expression froze. Even though her business was doing well, $150,000 was a significant amount that could affect her working capital. It coincided with the launch of a new project, and such an expense could put pressure on the company's finances. "Meryl, that amount is..." "Mom, it's my wedding," Meryl interrupted, staring intently at her mother. Nicole felt a pang in her chest. She had indeed saved $75,000 specifically for her daughter's wedding. $75,000 is doable, but, "Mom, weren't you saving for me?" Other moms prepare for their daughters' weddings years in advance. At that moment, anger bubbled up inside Nicole. But she suppressed it and responded calmly. "Meryl, I think you understand, but $150,000 is an amount that could impact the company's operations. Are you saying the company is more important than me?" Tears welled up in Meryl's eyes, but they seemed less like tears of true sadness and more like the frustration of a child who didn't get what she wanted. "It's not that. It's just..." "Never mind," Meryl muttered, sulking. "If you truly cared about me, Mom, you wouldn't react like this. Marty's parents said they'd be willing to cover the expenses for him." Watching her daughter grab her bag and storm out, Nicole asked herself, was this really the right decision? That night, Nicole received a call from her sister, Lizzie. "Nicole, Meryl called me, crying." "I see." Nicole replied in a tired voice. "But I think you made the right choice. She's been too spoiled," Lizzie said firmly. "Lizzie." "Nicole, I've been meaning to tell you this." Lizzie's voice was filled with seriousness. Raphael would never have wanted things like this. Lizzie's words stung. But within that pain, Nicole felt the truth. "Have I been wrong?" she murmured. "It's not that you were wrong. It's the way you've been showing your love," Lizzie said gently. Those words gave Nicole a sliver of hope, but that hope would soon crumble with what happened the next day. The following morning, Nicole's phone rang. The call was from her client and friend, Max. The clock hadn't even struck 7. "Nicole, have you seen Facebook? You need to check it right away," Max said, his usually cheerful tone absent. Hearing the unease in her friend's voice, Nicole felt a sense of dread. She opened her laptop and logged into Facebook. Meryl's post appeared on the screen. "My penny-pinching loser of a mother cares more about money than her own daughter's happiness. She was always too busy with work when I was a kid, and now she's crushing my dreams. Dad's death? I bet that's her fault too, because of her selfishness. Does she even know what real love is?" Nicole's heart broke as she read the words. It was devastating to be spoken about like this by the daughter she had raised with such effort. She had tried her best to ensure Meryl didn't feel lonely growing up with a single parent. But she never imagined it would be repaid this way. The post already had hundreds of likes and the comments were filled with sympathetic responses. So sad. A parent should prioritize their child's happiness. Some things are more important than money. If my mom were like that, I'd keep my distance too. Each comment pierced Nicole deeply. Especially the mention of Raphael's death that unearthed the pain she had desperately buried for 23 years. Nicole closed Facebook. For a while, she simply sat in her chair, staring into the void. Her mind swirled with memories. The night Raphael passed away, the years of working tirelessly to raise Meryl, all the ways she had tried her best for her daughter. Her phone rang again. This time, it was a call from her office. About the morning meeting. "Cancel it," Nicole said in a weary voice. "I'm not feeling well today." "Understood, but..." The hesitation in the voice on the other end was evident. "There have been some inquiries from a few board members regarding the social media issue." Ah, so the post was already making waves in the industry. As a prominent figure in IT consulting, her reputation was bound to take a hit. "Cancel all my appointments. For urgent matters, contact me directly on my cell," Nicole instructed. When Nicole hung up the phone, the room felt silent and heavy. About an hour later, the doorbell rang. Standing at the door was her sister, Lizzie. "Nicole, are you okay?" Nicole, looking apologetic, invited her sister inside. Lizzie headed straight to the kitchen and began preparing breakfast. "I saw Meryl's post," she said, while toasting some bread. Nicole remained silent, sipping the tea Lizzie had handed her. Her hands were still trembling slightly. "Lizzie," she said quietly, "was I a terrible mother?" "Not at all," Lizzie replied immediately. "But she's been spoiled for too long," Lizzie said firmly. Nicole felt a small bit of comfort from her sister's words, but at the same time, she felt deep regret. Had she truly raised her daughter the right way? Bringing up Raphael was crossing the line. Lizzie said, her voice tinged with anger. "Yes, Raphael." A sharp pain shot through Nicole's chest. Raphael's death was a wound that would never fully heal for her. To have that wound reopened by her own daughter was unbearable. Around midday, Nicole's phone rang again. It was Meryl's fiancé, Marty. "Hello?" Nicole." Marty's voice sounded nervous. "Marty," Nicole said calmly. I know about your insider trading. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. I can explain. It was just with my previous company. I don't want to discuss this right now, Nicole said, cutting him off before ending the call. By the evening, Meryl's post had been deleted, but screenshots had already spread widely across the internet. The post had even started to slightly affect the company's public relations. Are you just worried about your reputation? A message from Meryl popped up on Nicole's phone. At that moment, something inside Nicole snapped. She deleted the message without replying. Later that night, Lizzie showed up again, this time with a sleeping bag in hand. "I'm staying here tonight," she said. "I don't want to leave you alone." Nicole felt grateful for her sister's support. Throughout the day, Lizzie's presence had been her only solace. But this was just the beginning. This incident marked the start of an irreversible rift in the relationship between the mother and daughter. 3 days after the social media chaos, the situation escalated. Nicole's bank account received an unexpected deposit. The sender was Meryl, and the amount was $22,000. The accompanying message read, "This is my true worth. Enjoy it, you poor loser." Sitting at her office desk, Nicole stared at the screen of her smartphone for a long time. Outside the window, the Manhattan skyline stretched out before her. Nicole immediately sent the $22,000 back. Her reply read simply, "It's not about the money." Grabbing her jacket, she left the office. As Nicole drove, her mind raced. Why had Meryl sent that exact amount? She had an idea, a memory that surfaced. There was that one time a moment when Meryl had been scolded, but in the end, Nicole had given in to her tears and covered the expense. Looking back, that might have been the turning point. Her phone rang. It was Meryl. "You sent the money back." Meryl's voice was tinged with irritation. "It's not about the money," Nicole replied. "Not about the money? You were complaining about the wedding budget, weren't you?" "That's different." Different. Meryl's voice rose. "You care more about your company than you do about me, don't you? You always have. It's always been work, work, work. And for what? You don't even work for a big company. And yet I grew up in a house where we couldn't afford anything decent." Nicole was stunned. She couldn't believe her daughter thought of her that way. The truth was, Nicole had built a successful career. She was the CEO of Collins Innovations, a prominent IT consulting firm. After her husband Raphael passed away, Nicole had managed to balance parenting and work, eventually founding her own company. The business had flourished, but Nicole had kept her role as CEO a secret from Meryl. She wanted her daughter to grow up with a sense of normalcy and appreciate the value of money. In the early days when Meryl was young, Nicole's fledgling business had struggled. It had been easy to keep quiet about it then. Now, she wondered if it was time to reveal the truth. But before she could say more, Meryl interrupted. "Have you heard something about Marty?" Nicole hesitated for a moment. She had been concerned about Marty's past. "Meryl, let's sit down and talk calmly," she said. "It's too late for that," Meryl replied, her tone cold. "You don't actually care about my happiness, do you? That's not true." Nicole's voice rose despite herself. "I've always tried to give you everything you could ever want. And for the record, I'm the CEO of a company. I never told you because I wanted you to grow up with the same values as any normal family." "That's a lie. I don't believe you," Meryl snapped, cutting her off. Something inside Nicole broke. "I calculated how much money I've spent on you until you turned 18, she said, her voice low but laced with anger. "Over $850,000. She heard Meryl gasp on the other end of the line. "I'm thinking I'd like you to pay it back." "What? Are you joking?" "I'm not joking. You're an independent adult, aren't you? You should be able to take responsibility for yourself." "Is that a threat?" Meryl's voice was sharp with fury. "It's not a threat. It's a fact, Nicole said coolly. There was a moment of silence. Then Meryl erupted. You're the worst. I'd be better off without a mother like you. The call ended abruptly. Nicole pulled her car over to the side of the road, gripping the steering wheel tightly. Where had she gone wrong? What had she done to cause this? Everything felt like chaos. That night, she found herself alone, standing outside an old apartment building. The apartment where Meryl had lived until she was 5 was still standing, though it had grown old. The building was worn, but it remained intact. Raphael. Nicole murmured in the empty home. 2 months later, during an emergency board meeting, Nicole received a message from Meryl. She didn't open it immediately. After leaving the meeting room, she returned to her office and opened Meryl's message first. Mom, I want to apologize. Can we meet? Just then, her phone rang. It was Lizzie. Nicole, it's about Meryl, Lizzie said, her voice tense. Marty never intended to marry her. It was all just a distraction to divert attention from his insider trading accusations. What do you mean? Nicole sank deeply into her chair. She had suspected something, but hearing it confirmed left her shaken. And Meryl. She's crying. She's here at my house. Nicole stood up immediately. She instructed her secretary, Beth, to cancel the rest of her appointments and rush to her car. When she arrived at Lizzie's house, she found Meryl curled up in the living room. Her makeup was gone, and she wasn't wearing any designer clothes. She looked like a fragile 23-year-old girl. Meryl. At the sound of her mother's voice, Meryl slowly looked up. Her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Mom, I looked up your company. I couldn't believe it, but it's true you're really the CEO. I'm so sorry for saying such horrible things and hurting you. I've lost everything. Her voice trembled. Don't worry about that. Tell me everything about Marty, Nicole said as she sat beside her daughter. Meryl began speaking slowly. Last summer, I met him at a party. He was so charming and kind, she said, searching for the right words. Nicole listened silently. But he's a gambler. One day, I saw his phone. Meryl's voice faltered. Tears rolled down her cheeks. I was just a tool to him. Lizzie spoke softly. Meryl, you need to tell your mom everything. Meryl hesitantly pulled out her smartphone. Here. Look at this, she said. The screen displayed photos of Marty with another woman. The pictures, taken at a high-end restaurant last weekend, were clearly captured in secret. She wasn't just an ex, Meryl said, her tone calm. She's a securities analyst. They were working together to cover up evidence of insider trading. Nicole's expression grew stern. The wedding was part of their scheme. They thought showing strong family ties would reduce suspicion. I was just part of the act. Meryl's voice broke, and her shoulders shook as she began to cry again. Even attacking you, it was all Marty's idea. He said, create drama with your mom to gain sympathy. I was so stupid. Nicole gently placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. The social media posts, even Dad's photos. It was all his manipulation. Meryl said, her face contorted in pain as she buried it in her hands. Her tears wouldn't stop. Nicole held her daughter silently. I've been reflecting on my entire life. Meryl continued, her voice muffled against her mother's chest. I share some of the blame, Nicole said quietly. But Mom, I tried to keep my promise to your father, but in the wrong way. She continued. Mom, Meryl said softly. What should I do now? First, Nicole answered. We need to report Marty to the police. You have evidence of his insider trading, don't you? Meryl nodded in agreement. And then, Nicole continued, you need to carve out your own life with your own strength. I'll always be here for you. But after all those terrible things I said, the bond between a mother and daughter isn't so easily broken. Nicole said with a gentle smile. Lizzie came in from the kitchen, carrying warm tea. The three of them sat quietly, holding their cups and gazing out at the evening sky. Starting the next day, their lives would change drastically. There was Marty's betrayal, the fear of media scrutiny, and the challenges at the company. But at that moment, the room was filled with warmth. The New York Times headline read, "Rising star in IT industry arrested for insider trading." Marty's arrest sent shockwaves through the financial world. Nicole's office was flooded with interview requests from the early morning. But she delegated everything to the PR department and took the day off. She had more important matters to attend to. Ready. Nicole called to Merrill, who was waiting in front of Lizzie's house. The two got into the car and headed toward St. Mary's Hospital, the place where everything had begun 23 years ago. And this day it would mark a new beginning. Visiting Dad's grave, Merrill said softly. "I haven't done it since I graduated high school." Nicole listened in silence. She herself hadn't visited in years. Perhaps she had used work as an excuse to turn away from what truly mattered. When they arrived at the small cemetery behind the hospital, they walked quietly together. At Raphael's grave, fresh flowers had already been placed by Lizzie. "Dad." Merrill greeted the gravestone. A gentle breeze blew, rustling her hair. "I won't run away anymore. I'll build my own life, just like Mom taught me." Nicole stood beside her daughter solemnly as though making a prayer. That afternoon, Merrill visited her mother's office. They sat across from each other in the meeting room. "Mom, I've decided to start looking for a job," Merrill said with a determined expression. "I've been leaning on you and haven't put in any effort. But from now on." "That's a good decision," Nicole said with a smile. "And I'm going to move out of the apartment. I'll find a place I can afford with my own income, not a luxury one." Nicole felt a surge of pride in her daughter's resolve. At the same time, there was a touch of sadness. This was what she had always wanted for her daughter as a parent. "Mom," Merrill said, looking at her with earnest eyes. Nicole replied gently, "I'll always be on your side." Sunlight streamed through the window, heralding the arrival of spring. A new season was beginning. 1 year later, in spring. In a small cafe in Manhattan, Nicole sipped her coffee while reading the newspaper. The business section detailed Marty's prison sentence. "Sorry to keep you waiting." A cheerful voice broke her focus as Merrill took a seat across from her. It had been 10 months since Merrill started working as an editorial assistant at a publishing house. The glamour she once wore was gone, replaced by a healthy, radiant glow. "Today I have a new project proposal to share," Merrill said excitedly. "It's about a psychology book for children. It's for kids who've lost their parents." Nicole smiled. Her daughter was channeling her own experiences into helping others. "Aunt Lizzie has agreed to supervise the project," Merrill added. Their relationship was slowly, but steadily, mending. Weekend brunches had become a tradition, and they now openly discussed work and future dreams. "Mom," Merrill began, "next week is Dad's Memorial Day, isn't it?" "Yes, it is. This year I'd like to choose the flowers, and..." She pulled out a small envelope. Nicole opened it carefully. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Mom, I wanted to put into words the feelings I haven't been able to express until now. You raised me all by yourself. I never felt like I was lacking anything. But for a long time, I didn't recognize the weight of your love. Happiness given through money and things fades quickly. But the positivity, strength, and love you've taught me will live on inside me forever. I believe Dad is watching over me, and I think he's happy that, little by little, we're building a real bond as mother and daughter. With love. Merrill." Nicole quietly folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She felt a warmth rising in her chest, her eyes slightly misting. "Mom," Merrill asked with concern, "Thank you," Nicole said with a smile. "You're truly strong." Outside, the spring breeze carried flower petals through the air. The promise made 23 years ago is now bearing fruit in a new form. The two of them sat quietly, sipping their coffee and watching the view outside the window. From the office of the company left to me by my father, I gazed down upon the city at dusk. Through the windows of the high-rise buildings, the orange-painted sky and the bustling crowd below appear minuscule. My name is Jessica Hansen. I'm 28 years old. My father, Richard Hansen, built this company from scratch, but a year ago, he suddenly passed away. Since then, my stepmother Dorothy and stepsister Lauren have cast dark shadows over my life. After earning my master's degree in business administration from Stanford University, I joined my father's company, rising to the top of the marketing department with my inherent creativity and execution skills. I continued my father's legacy, contributing to the company's development. However, rumors have reached me that Dorothy and Lauren are influencing the board to threaten my position. The atmosphere within the company has gradually begun to change. Executives who were once supportive are now keeping their distance. My father Richard married Dorothy when I was 25. They met at a charity party. Dorothy, then 45 years old, captured 57-year-old Richard's heart with her beauty and intelligence. Having lost his wife 15 years earlier and raised me, his only daughter, Richard may have seen a chance for a second life in Dorothy's elegance and thoughtfulness. "Jessica, we are going to have a new family member," my father announced, just 3 months after meeting Dorothy. At that moment, I felt uncomfortable. The decision felt way too hasty. However, seeing my father happy for the first time in a long while, I could only nod in agreement. Dorothy had a daughter, Lauren, a year younger than me. Initially, Lauren was reserved and even friendly. "Can I call you sister?" she asked, and I thought to open my heart to her. The first few months after the marriage were peaceful. Dorothy played the perfect wife, making Richard happy. Family dinners were frequent, and on the surface it seemed like an ideal family. However, changes gradually began to appear. First, Dorothy started showing interest in managing the company. "I want to lessen your burden," she would say, gradually attending important meetings. Richard, moved by his wife's dedication, began to heed her opinions. At the same time, Dorothy's behavior at home started to shift. Her words towards me began to contain subtle barbs, and she overtly favored Lauren. "Jessica, you're old enough to have your own home, aren't you? It seems Lauren understands your father's company better than you do," she would casually remark. Richard's health began to deteriorate 2 years after their marriage. He collapsed from a sudden heart attack and was forced to spend a week in the hospital. After that, he continued to work while repeatedly being hospitalized. Every time my father was hospitalized, Dorothy showed devoted care. However, I noticed documents requiring my father's signature being brought into his hospital room. And then, on a peaceful spring day a few months later, my father passed away. That morning, I had received a call from him. "I have some time this evening?" His voice sounded tired. "Would you like to talk? Just the two of us." "Of course, Dad. Shall we meet at our usual restaurant at 6 in the evening?" "Yes, let's do that." However, that promise was never fulfilled. At 3 p.m., during a board meeting, Richard suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. When the arrival of the ambulance was announced, I was running down from the conference room on the upper floor. By the time I arrived at the hospital, it was too late. The doctor explained that it was a severe myocardial infarction. He never regained consciousness. I sat alone in my father's hospital room, holding his cold hand, reminiscing about our conversation that morning. What was he going to talk about? A week after my father's funeral, Dorothy, Lauren, and I gathered at the office of Joseph Anderson, my father's lawyer, for the inheritance proceedings. In the reception room, Dorothy, Lauren, and I sat down. Lawyer Anderson looked perplexed as he reviewed the documents. "This is odd," he said, frowning. Mr. Richard Hansen had mentioned that he had drafted a will. A will. Dorothy exclaimed in surprise. I wasn't aware of it. Lawyer Anderson nodded gravely. Yes. Actually, 2 months ago, when I met with Mr. Richard Hansen, he mentioned finalizing his will, especially concerning the succession of the company. But, he quietly said, we haven't found the will in his study safe nor the company's safe. We've searched everywhere we could. Dorothy added, giving the impression of being a bit too hasty. That's strange. Lawyer Anderson murmured, tilting his head. Mr. Richard Hansen was meticulous about his documents. He always kept a record of where important documents were stored. My father was quite ill towards the end, I said. Perhaps he didn't manage to prepare everything in time. You are probably right. Dorothy continued hastily. Yes, that might be it. Unfortunately, it looks like we'll have to proceed with the legal inheritance process. However, Lawyer Anderson's expression was not clear. Actually, he chose his words carefully. Mr. Richard Hansen had discussed the will in quite specific terms, especially. Just then, Dorothy stood up abruptly. Excuse me, Mr. Anderson, but it's clear there is no will, right? Discussing it further when it doesn't exist. Her strong tone made Lawyer Anderson falter for a moment. Yes, well, that's true, he conceded. I silently watched the exchange between them. There was a sense of urgency in Dorothy's demeanor. Suddenly, I recalled the unusual events on the day of my father's death. At the funeral, she had gone to my father's study alone. After about an hour, she returned as if nothing had happened. I was too engulfed in grief at the time to notice. But now, the strange behavior of that moment nagged at me. What had she been doing in my father's study? In the end, the inheritance proceedings moved forward without the will. However, my father's last words still haunted me. I want to talk, just the two of us. I have something important to tell you. What was he going to say that day? Why had the will disappeared? This was no coincidence. My intuition was screaming it. A few days later, a general assembly was held at the company. Many employees reminisced about Richard Hansen's contributions. Yet, a dark shadow had already crept in. In her speech, Dorothy declared, I will continue my husband's legacy and protect the company. The words struck a discordant note with me. The words my father wanted to convey at the end, the will that should have remained, had all been prepared for this moment. Soon after, rapid changes began within the company. Dorothy's influence in the boardroom increased, and she accelerated efforts to place her daughter Lauren in key positions. It was only a year after my father's death, and as time passed, I was unable to gather any information about her suspicious actions. One Wednesday afternoon, while preparing for an important board meeting, I overheard an unexpected conversation in the women's restroom. Just after I had entered a stall, Dorothy and Lauren came in. Getting rid of Jessica's position is so easy. The board does whatever we say. Dorothy's voice carried an unfathomable chill. But her marketing department is performing well, especially the Pendleton account, which accounts for 30% of the company's revenue. Lauren expressed concern. A hint of a guilty conscience could be heard in her voice. Then Dorothy's voice dropped suddenly. I instinctively pressed my ear against the wall to catch her words. It doesn't matter. I've hidden the will, and I've already disposed of everything in Richard's study safe. Jessica has no evidence. The company is ours now. But that's... She. Be quiet. Dorothy snapped sharply. Richard was foolish to leave such a will. But don't worry. I have a plan. We'll finalize the plan to remove Jessica at next week's board meeting. After they left, I was trembling. The business and legacy my father had desperately protected were in peril. My reflection in the restroom mirror was pale and bloodless. That night, I decided to consult with Nathan Fisher, a trusted colleague from my father's era and my mentor in the marketing department. We dined together at a high-end restaurant, where I detailed the conversation I had overheard. If the will is indeed hidden, that's a serious legal violation. Nathan said seriously. I knew your position was precarious. He took a sip of wine before continuing. Actually, there's also information that Dorothy has been quietly buying up company shares. Lately, she's been in frequent contact with the brokerage firm. That means... Yes, Jessica. Dorothy is plotting something. She's planning to oust you and install her daughter Lauren. She has used similar tactics in the past to take over her previous husband's company. His words brought back memories of my father. After his first hospital discharge, I sensed he was troubled by something. One rare night, just the two of us had dinner together. Jessica, I may have made a mistake, Richard had said quietly. Before I could delve deeper into the true intentions behind his words, Dorothy returned home earlier than expected, cutting our conversation short. That became the last genuine conversation I had with my father. Looking back, I should have probed deeper into his true feelings at that time. By the time he decided to speak to me again, it was already too late. My intuition was right, I said quietly. However, Nathan added, Dorothy's plan has a fatal flaw. She underestimates the law. If we exploit that, I resolved to fight. I won't let them take what my father built, I declared, with a sense of strength and pride inherited from my father. That night, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was Sandra Thompson, my father's former secretary. She had supported my father for over 30 years. Her expression mixed relief from years of pressure with new fears. After my father's death, Sandra had suddenly taken a leave of absence, citing health reasons, but the truth was different. Actually, I was threatened by Mrs. Dorothy Hanson, Sandra confessed, sitting down heavily at the desk. Right after Mr. Hanson passed away, she came to my home. That day, Dorothy had brought information about a job offer for Sandra's son, who had been struggling to find employment. You care about your son's future, don't you? Dorothy had whispered sweetly, holding an appointment letter from a major company in her hand. However, there is a condition. As Richard's secretary, you know a lot of confidential information. From now on, I need you to keep quiet about such matters. But that wasn't all. Sandra continued. I received monitoring calls almost weekly, and suspicious cars lingered around my house. I had to remain silent, fearing something might happen to my son. But I can't stay silent anymore, Sandra stated with determination. Mr. Richard Hanson trusted me with important information. It's time to honor that trust. Miss, I have something you need to see, she said, presenting an old diary. It belonged to my father. The leather-bound diary was worn at the corners. It contained entries about my father's anxieties after marrying Dorothy. I blame myself for not seeing her true nature. I should have investigated her past marriages and business reputation. I must protect Jessica. She is the only person who understands and can carry on my ideals. The words in the notes, especially those written during his hospital stay, struck a chord. I may not have long left. I couldn't stop Dorothy. Jessica, if this diary ever reaches you, please forgive my weakness. Until the end, your father was concerned about you, miss. He entrusted me to pass this to you if something happened to him. Yet, I was threatened by Mrs. Dorothy Hanson not to hand over anything from Mr. Richard Hanson. I was too scared. I'm sorry for the delay, Sandra said, tears shimmering in her eyes. I too should have noticed Mrs. Dorothy Hanson's ambitions earlier. That night, I read through my father's diary repeatedly. It was filled with his emotions. Joy, anguish, and regret, all vividly recorded. Particularly poignant were the words written on my birthday. Today, Jessica turns 5. Just seeing her smile makes all my fatigue vanish. For her, I must live honestly and earnestly. Wiping away tears, I renewed my resolve. This was not merely a struggle for control of a company. This was a fight to protect my father's ideals and his way of living. 3 nights later, with the help of Nathan and Sandra, I stepped into my father's study. That night, Dorothy and Lauren were at a charity party, not expected to return until late. The study, largely untouched since my father's death, was illuminated by moonlight. Jessica. Nathan paused in front of a bookshelf. Richard was meticulous. There must be some record. We began searching. Sandra at the desk drawers, Nathan at the bookshelves, and I near the safe. My father was known to regularly organize the contents of the safe. There had to be a record somewhere. "This is it," Nathan exclaimed, pulling out an old file. It was a supply management notebook my father had used for years. Flipping through, we found a detailed list of the safe's contents. The latest entry was just before my father first fell ill. Important documents including the will, stock certificates, company founding documents. My hands trembled. Indeed, the will had existed. However, now the safe was empty. But this alone isn't enough. I furrowed my brows. At that moment, Sandra stood up decisively. Perhaps this could be conclusive evidence. She pulled out her smartphone. "I haven't been able to show this email to anyone for a year," Sandra said, her fingers trembling as she operated the device. "I was scared to think what might happen if Mrs. Dorothy Hanson found it among important documents. I read it once and then saved it on an old device. But I can't continue to betray Mr. Richard Hanson's wishes any longer. The sender was my father. The date was early in the morning on the day he died. Sandra, I plan to meet with Jessica this evening. There are documents I want to give her. Just in case, I want you to also know where the copies of these documents are." The email included the location of a copy of the will. It was tucked away in the corner of the bookshelf, hidden inside my father's old diary. Found it. We carefully opened the diary. Indeed, there was a copy of my father's will sandwiched inside, dated 2 days before his death. It outlined the ownership of the company, the transfer of control to me, and the reasons for it. The diary also contained warnings about Dorothy. "This is definitive evidence," Nathan said, his face lighting up. "This proves that the will indeed existed." But that wasn't all. A thorough search of the study also turned up evidence of Dorothy's wrongdoing. My father's diary noted how she had forced him to sign documents she had brought in. The difference between the safe's inventory list and its current contents pointed to clear evidence of tampering. And then, the records of stock transactions. My father had been secretly tracking Dorothy's illicit dealings. 1 week later, a board meeting was convened. I arrived fully prepared, dressed in a dark blue suit and wearing the pearl necklace my father had given me. I entered the meeting room, where Dorothy wore her usual smug smile. But today, I had my father's support. The agenda for today is about the reorganization of the marketing department. The chairman began. Dorothy smiled contentedly. Before that, I stood up. "I would like you all to see this." The screen in the meeting room displayed detailed evidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board," I began in a steady voice, "I have gathered you here today to present significant evidence of illegal activities." The screen showed one piece of evidence after another. The email from my father to Sandra, the inventory list from the safe, the records of Dorothy's stock transactions. All of it pointed to her illegal activities. "This is fabricated." Dorothy raised her voice. "You made these up." But then, the door to the meeting room opened, and Lauren walked in, holding an envelope. "Let's stop the lies, Mom." Lauren's voice trembled. "This is the will you hid." The room fell silent. Dorothy's face drained of color. "Lauren, you." "I saw it," Lauren said, tears welling up. "That day, after Mr. Richard collapsed, I saw you taking documents from the study. The will extracted from the envelope clearly stated my father's intentions. The ethos of this company lies in honesty and integrity. Only those who understand and can implement these principles should run it. My daughter Jessica has embodied this spirit since she was a child. The company rightfully belongs to her." Lauren continued. "The ownership of the company belonged to Richard, and the right of inheritance is clearly stated to belong to Jessica, his blood relative. "Dorothy, your actions are a clear violation of the law." The room erupted into chaos. It was now clear that the company and all rights to it would be transferred to me. Dorothy slumped into her chair. "I admit it." Her voice was hoarse. "I hid the will." Murmurs arose among the directors. The evidence was perfect. At last, my father's final wishes were brought to light. "Jessica," Lauren called out to me as we were leaving. "I'm sorry. I should have spoken about the truth sooner." I nodded quietly. "Thanks to your courage, Lauren, we were able to show everyone my father's true intentions." The developments that followed were swift. An emergency board meeting was convened, and Dorothy's illegal activities were formally recognized. She was expelled from the board and legal proceedings were decided. She was charged with securities law violations, and during the trial, her past misconduct was revealed one after another. The prosecution presented evidence that she had attempted to take over 2 companies using similar methods in the past. In the case of her first husband's company, she tried to take control by buying shares under the guise of an anonymous investor but failed. The second time, she attempted the same with a partner's company but was not prosecuted due to insufficient evidence. The defendant's actions are clearly antisocial. The prosecutor sternly pointed out. Moreover, she betrayed the trust of the late Richard Hansen, engaging in illegal activities within just a year of his death. Throughout the trial, Dorothy's true character gradually came to light. Raised in a wealthy family, she developed an abnormal obsession with wealth and power following her father's bankruptcy. Her first marriage was also motivated by her partner's assets. Particularly shocking was the testimony about the truth behind Richard's death. Sandra, the former secretary, took the stand and disclosed crucial facts. On the day Mr. Richard Hansen fell ill, Mrs. Dorothy Hansen was unusually restless from the morning. Sandra recounted with a trembling voice, and just before Mr. Richard Hansen collapsed, she was muttering to herself, "I need to get these documents signed today." Although this testimony did not directly prove causality, it vividly illustrated Dorothy's character. The judgment was harsh. A 5-year prison sentence. The judge stated, "The defendant's actions have shaken the foundation of a business society based on trust." In prison, Dorothy lost all her former dignity. I visited her once. She spoke frankly, without pretense. "I have always lived my life striving to climb higher." Her voice was hoarse. "When my family went bankrupt, I was just 10. Since then, I believed that money and power were everything. But you had a daughter you loved." I challenged, but Dorothy smirked bitterly. "Lauren?" "Yes, indeed. But I only saw her as a tool to fulfill my ambitions. She knew that, and that's why she drifted away from me. She doesn't visit me." Lauren had separated from her mother and started her own small company. One day, she contacted me. We met in a hotel lounge. Being face to face with my former stepsister, she confined. "I want to change too," Lauren said. "Like you. I want to build something on my own. I want to step out from under my mother's shadow and live honestly." I smiled and responded, "Everyone has that opportunity. The important thing is to live honestly. That's the most important lesson my father taught me." New challenges awaited me. Many executives under Dorothy's influence announced their resignations, plunging the company into temporary chaos. However, this crisis brought new opportunities. I promoted capable young employees, including many who had been neglected by Dorothy. Thus, I continued my father's legacy and began to build a new management structure. Nathan remained by my side as my right-hand man, continuously contributing to the company's development. Most importantly, a new wind of hope began to blow within the company. A year later, the company recorded its highest performance ever. Now, a picture of my father hangs in my office. "Dad, our company is safe. It wasn't revenge we needed, but to build a better future," I said, smiling at his photo.